Being 5:30 and there is a quorum present, I will call this meeting of the May 23rd, 2022 Plan Commission meeting to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator.
All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Zellers, floor is yours.
Thank you. Next is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, I would like to say under this item a welcome to Gabe Mendez, who is joining us for the first time today on the Plan Commission. Welcome, Gabe. Thank you for joining us. Next is public comment, and we do have one public comment. Bob Kleba, East Gorham Street, neither support nor opposed, wishing to speak. Bob Kleba.
Looks like Bob is not with us at the moment.
Actually, he just came in.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yep.
Mute. Okay, sorry, you caught me off guard.
Go ahead, Bob. You have 3 minutes.
And I am looking for my testimony. Okay, this is involves a conversation that I've had with planning and Chair Zellers, and I just wanted to share it with the Plan Commission. It involves the remarks or the my observations from the staff reports on 519, 547 West Wash and 609, 615 East Dayton. In the West Wash staff report, the report concludes, when the recommendations of the adopted plans are considered, the scale and use of the proposed building recommendation of the UDC and the proposed conditions of approval are considered, staff believes that the Plan Commission could find the demolition approval standards and conditional use approval standards can be met. I think this is a bit of a confusion between demolition and application for conditional use. In both Legistar records for the request for demolition, links to the applications for conditional use are provided. Furthermore, the agenda for tonight's meeting specifies that the requests for demolition and the applications for conditional use for these two proposals be considered together as one item. While I don't know the exact state statute, I hear consistently at landmarks and at Plan Commission meetings that state law does not allow the commissioners to consider future use when reviewing a request for demolition. Unfortunately, I believe that we cannot avoid prejudicing the Plan Commission with the way the information about the proposed demolitions and uses in the agenda, in Legistar, and in the staff reports is presented. If we are to review the requests for demolition on their merit, they must be treated with separate staff reports and as separate agenda items. I am unaware of a city policy that requires Planning and Plan Commission to review these items together. Obviously, it is too late to change the agenda for tonight's meeting. However, I feel that the Commission and planning staff need to set up a policy so the spirit of the state law is better respected at future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Do any of the plan commissioners have any questions of Bob Kleba? Seeing no raised hands, we will move on to the minutes of May 9th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. I will assume unanimous consent of approval of the minutes unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the minutes pass unanimously. Schedule of upcoming meetings. We have a regular meeting on June 13th, June 27th, July 11th, and July 25th. And then we also have a special working session on June 23rd. That one is at 5 o'clock as opposed to our regular 5:30 time. So please note that. Moving on. The next item on our agenda, we'll move to the consent agenda. We have several items on the consent agenda. I will read those agenda item numbers. First is agenda item 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 15, 16, 17. So it is a custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda the items on which staff believes an applicant has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak. So we're taking up those items now. Are there any commissioners who wish any of those items separated out for consideration? Seeing no raised hands, I will then read those items into the record. Again, the first one is agenda item 2, that is Legistar 71224, determining a public purpose and necessity and adopting transportation project plats for the required acquisition per the plats of land interest for the East-West Bus Rapid Transit Project located in the city of Madison and also within part of the village of Shorewood. These are located in the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, 11th, 12th, 15th, and 17th Alder District. Next, agenda item 3, Legistar 71235, authorizing the city's execution of a lease with Curtis Martin, allowing for the use of a portion of the city-owned transportation corridor parcel located at 251 Jackson Street, 15th Alder District. Agenda item 4, Legistar 70648, amending Madison General Ordinance 33.24 4, paren 15, paren C, map of urban design district 6. Agenda item 5, Legistar 70805, amending table 28C1 to create a column multifamily dwelling 37 to 60 units and amending tables 28.051. Agenda item 11, Legistar 70749, located at 3706 South Dutch Mill Road, 16th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit for a previously demolished industrial building. Agenda item 15, Legistar 70924, located at 2303 West Beltline Highway, 10th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow demolition of an auto sales building. Agenda item 16, Legistar 70925, located at 2310 Crossroads Drive, 17th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for a university. Agenda item 17, Legistar 70926, located at 2425 South Stoughton Road, 16th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for an auto repair business. And then the last item is for referral to June 27th, 2022, pending consideration of a variance for the project by the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is agenda item 18, Legistar 70928. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next, we will consider agenda item 6, Legistar 71082, repealing Madison General Ordinance Section 28.182, paren 5, paren C, known as protest petition, and amending MGO Section 28.182, paren 5, paren B, to include a 2/3 favorable vote by Common Council to pass zoning map amendments. And do we have a staff member who is going to give an overview, Heather?
I can give a brief overview. As mentioned in the staff memo from planning and zoning staff, the original ordinance would remove the provision for the protest petition from the City of Madison ordinances and add a new provision that would require a 2/3 majority vote. That would be 14 of 20 alders or 2/3 of those in attendance and voting for all future rezonings in the city. There is an alternate ordinance on Legistar that has been sponsored, and that ordinance would simply remove the provision for the protest petition from the Madison ordinance and retain the simple majority vote, or in the case of Madison's council, 11 of 20 common council members voting on future rezonings. The staff report did provide an overview of the 13 protest petitions that have been received over the last decade or so, noting that none of them actually impacted a decision in the end, yet still required a lot of time on the part of the petitioners and required staff time as well to analyze the petition. I think in all, staff supports the alternate version of the ordinance that would remove the protest petition provision, but retain the simple majority vote, and adds that if the Plan Commission and ultimately the council considers the 2/3 majority vote, that they just carefully consider the potential impacts of that. The staff report also notes analysis that was not done by staff, but was done by one of the sponsors, demonstrating that over the years, the rezonings that have come to the council generally do pass almost, with only a few exceptions over the past decade or so, with more than that 2/3 majority vote. I think staff's thoughts on this are that introducing a 2/3 majority threshold really creates a situation where rezoning is held to a different standard than most ordinance changes, and a standard close to a budget amendment in the city. So again, staff generally supports removal of the protest petition and supports the alternate version of the ordinance, subject to discussion this evening by the Plan Commission. And this item is scheduled to be decided by the Common Council at their next meeting following a recommendation by Plan Commission. I'm sorry, their meeting of June 7th, not the meeting tomorrow evening. That is what I have at this point, but happy to try to take questions if there are any after the public hearing.
Thank you, Heather. And we do have registrants. The first registrant is Bill Connors, West Main Street, opposed, wishing to speak, representing Smart Growth. Bill, you have 3 minutes.
Very good. Can I confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Smart Growth urges you to recommend that the Common Council adopt the alternative version of the ordinance introduced by Alder Juliana Bennett rather than the version of the ordinance that was originally introduced. Smart Growth opposes the version of the ordinance that was originally introduced. I think we all understand and agree with the reasons for repealing the protest petition process. The state legislature repealed the law that used to require municipalities to have a protest petition process. After that state law was repealed, many municipalities have repealed their protest petition processes while keeping the vote generally required for rezoning at a majority. Progressive states and municipalities throughout the country have been repealing protest petition processes and laws and ordinances that require a 2/3 affirmative vote to approve a rezoning, because both of them are used by not in my backyard people to try to stop additional housing density from being located in their neighborhoods. I ask you to consider a few questions. Let's say the Plan Commission concludes that a requested rezoning is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and recommends that the Common Council approve the rezoning. Why would it be good policy to make it easier for a minority of the Common Council, for whatever reason, to reject the recommendation of the Plan Commission and thwart an action that is consistent with the comprehensive plan? That is what the ordinance as originally introduced does. How is that good for the city of Madison? Requiring a supermajority vote to adopt some action usually is reserved for an action warranting a higher level of scrutiny, such as a budget amendment. Why should rezoning that the Plan Commission has recommended as being consistent with the comprehensive plan be subjected to a higher level of scrutiny like a budget amendment? Requiring a supermajority vote allows a minority of the Common Council to thwart the will of the majority. Please consider how the filibuster rule in the U.S. Senate prevents action. A supermajority requirement is inherently undemocratic and should be reserved for situations that truly warrant it. A rezoning that is recommended by the Plan Commission as being consistent with the comprehensive plan does not warrant an undemocratic supermajority requirement. I understand that in the past there have been few instances where a rezoning passed with a majority vote would have failed if 2/3 affirmative vote were required. The past is not necessarily a good predictor of the future, given the frequent changes in the composition of the Common Council. For these reasons, Smart Growth urges you to recommend that the council adopt the alternative version of the ordinance. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Bill. The next registrant is Ulrike Detterly, opposed on North Blackhawk Avenue and wishing to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the time. Yes, I am definitely opposed to any change to this section 28.182 sub 5 sub C that addresses protest petitions. Residents should not be denied the right to petition, no matter what the history on this is. To remove this potential process is another attempt to silence neighborhood voices in favor of supporting the financial well-being of developers, many of whom do not even reside in Madison or Wisconsin for that matter. It is time for the city and its decision-making bodies to listen to residents and to seriously consider their quality of life issues. Bringing a process like the petition forward takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And I think it behooves this body as well as the Common Council to pay attention to that. The Plan Commission and ultimately Common Council should not be undermining neighborhood rights, and I put rights in quotes because they've been diminished of late, which were amended fairly recently. This section was just amended in 2017. Discomfort with specific democratic processes should not result in their elimination. Broad input, including dissent and disagreement, are part of living in a true democracy. Please do not place expediency above the well-being of our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next registrant is William Ochowicz, East Gorham Street, support wishing to speak. Representing Madison is 4 people. William. William, you have 3 minutes.
William, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself. Looks like you're on a computer. It might be behind a window or something. You are unmuted on our end. All right, maybe we can move on and try to...
Okay, if you could try to troubleshoot with Will, we will move to our next registrant, Sandy Blakeney, Linden Avenue, opposed and wishing to speak. Sandy.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I urge the commission to vote against the alternate amendment. The repeal of a state statute requiring protest petitions doesn't mean we can't create an improved petition process. Concerns about equal access to the process or worries about delays could be easily addressed. As a start, the planning staff could make available the brochure they created with clear guidance about how to submit accurate petitions. In fact, the planning department, as recently as 2017, has been, quote, very supportive of the protest petition process and the importance of greater public participation in the rezoning process. According to staff, there have been 13 protest petitions in the past 10 years, or an average of a mere 1 1/3 per year. You've received statements from people saying that the petition process delays or even prevents the development of much needed housing. At the same time, you're told by staff that none of the petitions had an impact on the rezoning process. Clearly, the petition process is not the problem. A group of residents asking the city to assess the adequacy of a new development can result in a better quality building, increasing quality of life and access to necessary resources for all, not just for the privileged few. There are a number of standard routine council procedural items that require a 2/3 vote. Approval of a land use that conflicts with the existing planned use is certainly at least as important as council procedure, if not more so. Zoning is everything when it comes to urban planning and land use. Zoning is a tool for Madison to decide what's appropriate for the future of the city. Zoning can encourage inclusion, create affordable and equitable housing opportunities, protect open spaces, and ensure that much needed increased housing integrates with design and scale of the surrounding area. When done thoughtfully, rezoning can connect people and places, improve quality of life, address environmental concerns, and help resolve the overarching issues of food and housing insecurity. If rezoning should not be subject to higher scrutiny, either through the protest petition process or by requiring a higher affirmative vote threshold in general, I don't know what would be. The staff report hints at an unspecified hypothetical negative impact on future rezonings. I urge you not to make decisions based on unfounded fears. We're all seeing an attack on democratic principles at the national level, and I'm sad to see that it's starting to find a toehold here in Madison. There's no good reason to squelch citizen participation in the workings of the city. I urge you to deny this alternate amendment. If you determine that it's Madison's best interest to end the rezoning protest petition, I would ask that you approve the initial amendment and require a 2/3 vote on all rezoning amendments. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sandy. Our next registrant is Robert Proctor, East Main Street, neither support nor oppose, wishing to speak, representing the Realtors Association of South Central Wisconsin. Robert, you have 3 minutes.
Looks like Robert is not with us.
Okay. The next registrant is Marcia Cannon, Cherokee Circle, opposed, wishing to speak. Marcia, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. A core motivation for zoning is community control over its land use, appearance, and future quality of life. For major developments, an acre or more, I might say, a valid protest petition empowers citizens to formally oppose a zoning proposal. Well-funded developers have huge resources to influence zoning or rezoning and to get it done quickly. The protest petition empowers citizens to be heard officially as a group. In February, the Ramish Farm Work Group organized a successful protest petition effort. Volunteers went door to door after work in the dark winter cold. They obtained notarized signatures from owner-occupants of 25 existing homes adjacent to a proposed development on 63 acres of agriculture land. They had urged the developer to postpone bringing several hundred new residents to a location soon to be bombarded by ear-shattering noise from F-35 fighter jets. But the developer had control, and they persisted. The citizens' protest petition got city government's attention. Common Council evaluated how the proposed zoning risked future residents' health and quality of life. The outcome? Postponement with a 14-6 vote to place the proposal on file without prejudice. That's an outcome, folks. Would Ramish Farm rezoning have been rubber stamped by Common Council without the protest petition? I'm not a fortune teller. What I can say is the protest petition is a crucial tool in a democracy. A wealthy developer might check all the boxes for zoning approval, but who will ensure future quality of life for the community? I support the existing protest petition ordinance that requires 3/4 vote of Common Council members present. I would support a blanket requirement for a 2/3 vote in support of all rezoning, only if it includes a vehicle to officially document neighborhood concerns or applies to rezoning of land already zoned agriculture. I don't believe that staff are overwhelmed with this issue. Our petition was in good shape. We got an answer within 2 hours of when it was submitted. I can't imagine there was a week-long effort to evaluate it. Basically, I strongly oppose eliminating the protest petition altogether. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marcia. Is Will now able to connect?
So it looks like we have another registrant. Let's see here. Linda Leonards.
Okay, wishing to
If you
speak?
can, yeah,
Okay.
refresh here. Linda, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself, or I believe it's *9 on your phone.
Okay,
There you go.
Linda, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. One of the complaints about this is that the protest petition can delay a rezoning vote to the subsequent council meeting. That change was made in 2017 because in that particular instance, the petitioners had 2.5 days to collect petitions. Language could be finessed in the ordinance so that it's only in that tight time frame that protest petitions can be delayed to the following Monday. And the staff at that time supported the change because, quote, it should result in greater participation in the rezoning process. Now, rather than wanting greater participation, the goal is to shut out that participation. There's talk about it's unfair because those who have experience and access to legal counsel are more likely to use it. Put the city 2013 brochure on the website so everybody knows it and can use it. There's talk about how this is valued for the privileged, for those with resources and time. The brochure would help level the playing field. And as a matter of fact, the most recent petition was filed by a neighborhood that has less than the median Dane County income. 2 of those petitions should be taken off the list. There really only should be 11 because neither of those, Division Street and Ramish Farm, actually were considered by the council as protest petitions due to various procedures. They never came up. It's worth noting that if protest petitions are repealed, it's not just taken away from those nagging neighbors, but property owners also would lose the benefit of having that 3/4 vote in case the city was looking at rezoning their properties. The staff report states protest petitions are most often used to oppose the development of new housing that would bring new residents to the area. It's not the problem with new residents. It's the problem with the comprehensive plan continues to talk numerous times about context-sensitive design. And often these new buildings don't look like that. And the neighbors should have the ability to speak. Bill Connors talks about all the other Dane County municipalities and states that have done away with this stuff. While most Wisconsin municipalities did not have ordinances, they relied on state law. I could not find any that have taken affirmative action to repeal a protest petition. DMI and Bill Connors talked to progressive states and communities having repealed this. Well, 3 of Wisconsin's neighboring states have protest petitions, Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa. Only 2 states have removed it, South Carolina and Wisconsin. And earlier this year, Wauwatosa modified but did not repeal its ordinance. And Massachusetts was told to you to be somebody who repealed it. They did in January of 2021, and 6 months later, by July of 2021, they reinstated it.
Thank you, Linda. That concludes your available time. Do we have the ability to hear from Will Showitz?
Looks like Will was, yep, there we go.
Okay, Will, you have 3 minutes.
I had to switch computers. Thank you, commissioners. Madison's current 3/4 requirement is copied verbatim from the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act from 1926. This law was designed in a period where property rights did not mean what you could do with your land, but what you could determine what your neighbor could do with their land. And more importantly than that, it often meant it determined the color and class of your neighbor. The entire idea of a zoning petition is segregationist and exclusionary. There's no reason that a progressive city like Madison should continue to have a process whereby 20% of people within a small area can trigger a supermajority vote. I would encourage you to not only repeal the 3/4 requirement in zoning petitions entirely, but also require just a simple majority for a rezoning if the Plan Commission approves and the Common Council approves. You heard from many of the members of Madison is for People in letters this week, and also some people who are not members. It is very important that we consider not just the cases where a rezoning would have failed because of the petition, but also consider the cases that have not been brought forward because a potential rezoning petition could trigger a supermajority vote. There are certainly instances where someone has owned a parcel of land, intended to use it for something that would fit in with the comprehensive plan, and not brought that plan forward because it would have required a rezoning, and they may have been afraid of a rezoning petition, and they did not want to take that risk. It is important during the housing crisis that we take away ways for people to say no. You've heard some people say that this enables neighbors to give their voice, but it also silences people who are not directly next to a development. In the case of the Zion Church development, a small number of people, I believe it's 2 or 3 people, were able to file the zoning petition, and up to 30 people would have lived in that building. Fewer than 10% of the people who would have occupied it, who would have lived there, are given a say over the people who would actually live there. That's unjust. It is important that we repeal zoning petitions and allow a simple majority of the vote to enable rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. That is the last person registered to speak. Others that are available to answer questions: Bob Kleba, East Gorham Street, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. And I guess he's the only one not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions.
Chair Zellers, I just see one more later addition in that category. And it's Jared Howard of McKenna Boulevard, not wishing to speak in support and available to answer questions.
Okay, good. Thank you, Heather. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Are there questions of any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Bennett.
Hi, and hi, Plan Commission. I'm going to just direct my questions to Heather. Hi, Miss Heather. So I'm curious to know, is it true that, so I'm wondering if you could tell us more about the additional pressure on staff and even Plan Commission that a 3/4 majority vote created by protest petition creates for you?
Sure. I will start by saying that I would not encourage the Plan Commission or Council to base a decision on staff burden. The protest petition doesn't present a burden to the Plan Commission because it all happens after the Plan Commission recommendation occurs. The biggest burden to staff is the not knowing that it's coming and needing to immediately address it and prioritize that assessment analysis as the critical next thing to do. So when we get a protest petition, we in the planning division have to immediately coordinate with the city clerk and also the city attorney's office to analyze that petition and determine whether or not it is a valid petition based on the many ways a petition can be valid in the ordinance. And so we're counting signatures, trying to determine where folks live based on records from the clerk's office or the property records. And, I would say it varies tremendously depending on how many folks have signed a petition. In lower density areas where you might have single family homes surrounding a site, sometimes it's just a small number of petitioners that can force a 3/4 majority vote. And so the analysis piece of that, the staff time that it takes to determine the validity of that petition takes a relatively short amount of time. On the other hand, if it's close, or if we're dealing with a higher density developed area where we're looking at clerk's records of registered electors, it can take a little bit more time to determine whether a petition is valid. From my perspective, the staff time isn't necessarily the key issue, and certainly I don't think that was the intent in the memo. It is an unanticipated highest priority when a petition does land, to coordinate among agencies and determine its validity, but it takes anywhere from, I would say, 2 hours to a day's work, depending on the interagency communication there. So it's not an enormous amount of work, but it is unanticipated. I hope that answers that piece of the question for you.
It does. Thank you, Heather.
Did you have any follow-up questions, Alder Bennett?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So I'm wondering if you could tell us more about the lower level of scrutiny that a simple majority vote has for zoning changes, and how that, and if in your experience where it is just a simple majority vote to pass a zoning change, is it generally a contentious issue that takes a lot of time during council to debate, etc.?
Sure. So I think that, among the council items taken up that require anything but a simple majority vote, the list is relatively short. I know that the budget amendment is probably the top of that list. That's an item that always does require that supermajority or 3/4 vote. For rezonings, we've long had in Madison, and I think the vast majority of municipalities, the simple majority vote would pass a rezoning after a recommendation by the Plan Commission, by this body. I think it varies tremendously. Sometimes a proposed rezoning can be completely consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, have a strong, even unanimous vote from the city's plan commission, and still perhaps not pass at the common council. That can happen. I think, much more typically, what we see is that the council will take the recommendation of the city's plan commission and usually pass rezonings near unanimously. I think there are a lot of rezonings that do move through without controversy. But I think that the real question here is, should a rezoning really be held to a different standard than the vast majority of actions that the council is taking? And I think that, there are many rezonings. The council sees about 35 per year on average, if we look at the past few years. And in Madison, the structure of our zoning map and zoning code will only bring us more and more rezonings as we move forward to allow for and encourage more housing in the city. And I think, anything but a simple majority does leave the question of, what unexpected events or pressures might the council face that might cause a rezoning that's consistent with the comprehensive plan to end up failing. So I think that's the question really for the Plan Commission and ultimately the council to wrestle with.
Sure.
Heather, did you have any further questions, Alder Bennett?
I have a couple more.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. So also on that note of, what am I trying to say? The level of scrutiny and if a zoning change should have that, I'm wondering what do you foresee as like the impacts of like having a 2/3 majority vote? And will it hurt our city's prospects of creating additional housing by making it more difficult to pass zoning changes?
Sure, I think it could. I think it's really subject to the composition of the council, and we'll see how that changes through the years. I think that a 2/3 vote would allow for 7 council members to determine to vote against a rezoning, regardless of whether it's consistent with our adopted plans. But let's say that it is consistent with our adopted plans and that it involves housing. Just 7 members of the council could act against that rezoning and cause that to fail. And so I think, that's the actual, realistic impact of moving forward with a 2/3 majority threshold.
Sure. And on that note, I'm wondering if this original ordinance change that is put in front of us doesn't, in that impact, it doesn't really get rid of protest petitions, whereas it expands the power of a protest petition. Would you say that I'm correct in that assessment, that it basically grants the entire city the power of a protest petition without having to go through that process?
Very close to that. In looking at our list here, we've had 13 protest petitions filed in the past decade. The council sees 35 rezonings a year on average. And so that's, I'll say 350 over the course of a decade. Very few rezonings actually are, subject to a protest petition. But the high bar for that protest petition really does have an impact on the types of individuals who will take the time to move through the protest petition process. I think that if the council were to move forward with the removal of the protest petition, but instigate a 2/3 majority vote, yes, we would see a 2/3 majority vote needed to pass any rezonings into the future. So the 35 on average per year, rather than the 1 on average per year that we've seen subject to a protest petition over the past decade.
Sure. And then my final question is, I know some of our residents are concerned with how the impact of removing protest petitions and allowing them to engage with our city processes and with our democratic processes. And I'm wondering, in your view, what are alternatives to engaging with the city should we remove protest petitions?
Sure. That's a great question. I think, to me, the protest petition is not really one of our main opportunities in this city for engagement. It's something that is a measure at the very end of a process for a very small group of individuals to force a certain vote on a rezoning. We have, as many of you know, in Madison, many, many opportunities for engagement, whether it's in our planning processes, in public hearings that are associated with any and all rezonings. And so folks who have concerns are welcome to share those concerns in writing or by showing up at Plan Commission and council meetings to share their concerns about any rezoning. Rezonings do require public hearings at both the Plan Commission and the council. And so those are opportunities, as a proposal is moving through the formal approval process, for folks to have their voices heard, whether in writing, verbally, or both. Prior to that, though, rezonings are very often involving neighborhood meetings that alders and staff attend and help to facilitate. And those often happen prior to a rezoning application even being submitted to the city for formal review. And so those are other opportunities that happen regularly, but aren't required in our ordinances to occur. Those would be, I think, the best opportunities, absent a protest petition, which in my mind is really sort of a last second effort that provides the opportunity for a few folks to change the vote threshold needed to pass a rezoning.
Thank you, Heather. Does that conclude your questions, Alder Bennett?
It does. Thank you, Liddell.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. This is also a question for staff, probably Heather. And could you give us a little bit of background on why this change originally included the 2/3 number, and then an alternate was proposed. Was staff originally of a mind that 2/3 was a reasonable threshold and changed their mind, or what? Just some little background on why this was presented one way and then and an alternate is now presented. I understand your concerns with the supermajority, but I'm a little bit curious about how you'd arrived at this point.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, staff in our city attorney's office was responding to basically requests from the original sponsors to move forward with the original amendment. It looks like we do have all three sponsors of the original amendment here, and it might be a question that's best directed to the sponsors.
I'm fine with that. Whoever can best answer why the original amendment was put forward, and do the sponsors still support it?
Alder Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez, for the question. So I'm one of the sponsors of the original, and we took quite a while talking through options. We were so Alder Heck, Figueroa Cole, and myself were the sponsors for the original proposal, and our primary interest and focus was to eliminate the protest petition procedure. There are from I'll just speak for myself going forward here, but others can chime in. For me, it's a really problematic procedure. I appreciate Heather saying that it's something that, depending on the time, it may present more or less hassle for staff, and I agree that's not like that wouldn't be a good reason to get rid of it. But it ultimately, for me, probably the biggest thing is that it's just very inequitable. It's relatively easy for neighbors or a property owner to file such a petition if they're in, for example, a single family home area where you can get the property owners / residents to sign on, and you only need a relatively small percentage. For cases like the project that was downtown on State Street, you're left looking for registered voters and trying to figure out who the registered voters are, and it's just really complicated and not nearly as accessible, basically for renters as opposed to single family home residents. So for that reason alone, really drove a lot of my interest in eliminating the procedure, as well as the issues that it can just cause delays. That if you wait to file it until the last minute, it will necessarily push consideration of that item to a future council meeting, which I think is really causes a lot of unnecessary harm in the process when a lot of people are planning on trying to speak to an item. So our focus was really around getting rid of it. We talked quite a bit about a simple majority versus a 2/3. We were originally going to propose a simple majority as well, but really tried to think about what level of change this would create, and felt like a 2/3 was sort of the least change. It would get rid of the protest petition, but essentially keep the end results of that petition in having a higher bar for the zoning changes. And so that's what we ended up putting forward. But speaking personally, I understand the arguments for a simple majority as well. And I think, I'm really interested to hear from commissioners here what your feedback is. I think there's pros and cons on both sides, and it really just depends on which side you're on for any given rezoning argument. But that's my rationale for why we put forward the 2/3. And then Alder Bennett put forward the alternate for the simple majority.
Do either of the other sponsors wish to speak? Alder Heck.
Thanks. I'll make this simple. I absolutely agree with what Alder Foster had to say about the process. As one of the co-sponsors, I was torn between how we should proceed with regards to a simple majority or 2/3, although I do agree that the protest petition should go. I can see both sides of the argument. You could say that, I don't want to speak to without a motion being made yet. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I would say that the protection provided by a 2/3 majority does perhaps require someone proposing a zoning change to dig in and make sure that they really have communicated with neighbors and also the alder of the district. But it does, in some sense, seem undemocratic to me. So I have some sympathy for those that prefer a simple majority. It's also, for me, wrapped up in, I think, something Heather referred to about who's on Common Council and who's on Plan Commission. We have to think about the repercussions of that. And that's why I'm still torn between these two options. Because we don't know what the makeup of Plan Commission or Common Council will be. So there's something to be said for both approaches.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole, did you want to respond to Commissioner Fernandez's question?
Sir, I don't want to be repetitive of what Alder Foster and Alder Heck had mentioned, but really our main purpose here is to eliminate the process. I mean, after a couple of these petitions that come through and working with Heather and their staff to try to really understand what the processes are on these regards, it's extremely convoluted and it's really not a fair process, especially when it comes to density. It's really the one that we did for in a high density area. It is hard for staff to pre-set the number of people that are needed and then sift through all that information. So it just creates a lot of confusion and pain for everybody around it. So our goal here is to eliminate the petition itself. As Heather mentioned, there's plenty of opportunity for public speaking through committees, through referrals, through the Common Council. So it's not like we are silencing people's voices. There's still the opportunities out there for people to continue to provide their input. So I am looking to you, the experts, to facilitate or to provide feedback regarding the 2/3 versus the majority vote. So that's what I'm really standing at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner, yes.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission forward the alternate ordinance to the Common Council and retain the simple majority vote.
Is there a second? Alder Lemmer seconds the motion. Thank you. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, please. I strongly believe that we only need a simple majority vote for rezonings. We have a very vigorous public process of reviewing rezonings within the city of Madison. We have neighborhood meetings organized by the neighborhood association or the alder. We have numerous public hearings and public involvement of rezoning applications. So voices will be heard, and they are heard throughout the process. And right now we have about 1 or 2 protest petitions filed each year, but 35 rezonings. And we've created, at least in the comprehensive plan and neighborhood plans, a lot more high density development. We haven't potentially rezoned those areas yet, but we're going to have a lot more rezonings in the future. And I've seen over my tenure on the Plan Commission that rezoning for multiple family development is very controversial, adjoining lower density neighborhoods. And it takes a quite strong Plan Commission and City Council to override, in some cases, a result or affirm a rezoning petition that we feel is consistent with the plan. And I think that creating a 2/3 majority vote will allow the minority to thwart the majority focus of the city of Madison and in our plan processes. So I strongly urge the Plan Commission members to approve the motion I'm putting forward here, because I truly believe that if we require 2/3 majority vote for future rezonings, we're going to go down the wrong avenue here, and we're creating a really bad situation. So I would urge you to support my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there further comments in regard to this motion? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I mentioned this in my earlier remarks, which were in some ways probably speaking more to the motion than they should have been. But so I apologize for that. But right now, I feel like the city of Madison is extremely fortunate to have the Plan Commission that we have. You folks are bright and do your homework and are really good, I think, about considering the standards of approval and recognizing what deserves approval and what doesn't, including with regard to zoning changes. And as an alder rather than a plan commissioner, when we've taken up appeals and protest petitions at council, I'm often amazed. It's like, Plan Commission is so awesome. It's like you're like insulting their intelligence and their hard work, and then we get to council, and sometimes there are alders who may not appreciate the hard work that Plan Commission does. So it's my inclination is, yes, we should get rid of protest petitions. But as I mentioned in my remarks, I do worry a little bit about who will be on future plan commissions and who future alders will be, and how that will impact, this type of proposal, which I agree with. So I'm still a little concerned about the majority, even though in our current situation, I think it's exactly what we should do. But I worry a little bit about who future alders will be, and worry that the Plan Commission won't be as efficient and intelligent as it is currently. So I'm not sure if a 2/3 majority would accomplish that, would like limit damage somehow. But I'm still thinking this through, so I'm anxious to hear what the rest of you say. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. So you asked, so I'm going to express what is probably a minority opinion. And I want to say this with huge respect for Commissioner Cantrell's remarks, which I don't disagree with. And I wholeheartedly support the repeal of this petition process, partly because of the low threshold for that. 20% of the people sign a petition, and all of a sudden that means a higher threshold for the council. And that is inherently non-democratic. And I wholeheartedly support this. But I do have strong reservations about going back to a simple majority because a zoning change feels like a big deal to me. When a person buys a property, they buy it to some extent relying on the information of the zoning of the properties nearby. Now, right now, we're in something of a housing crisis, and certainly we want to support construction of more housing. But that's not the only way in which a zoning change can take place. And it does feel to me that there is some extent to which the people closest by deserve a little more say. Now, I don't like the I don't like the way the petition process is written, and I wholeheartedly support its repeal. But I do like the idea that council would pay a lot of attention to a zoning change. And I think if a zoning change is a good one and it's recommended by the Plan Commission as being consistent with the master plan, it's not going to have any trouble garnering a 2/3 majority. But I do feel like a zoning change is an important and tends to be permanent change in the way things are going to be, and that it does greatly affect the nearby property owners, and sometimes the subtlety of the master plan does not fully reflect the effect on those owners. So I'm expressing both a little bit of the ambivalence of Alder Heck, but also I'm leaning toward retaining the 2/3 majority.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Bennett.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. I know my colleague spoke to why they decided to sponsor the 2/3 majority vote, and I want to uplift and strongly recommend that you support the alternate, and I'll tell you why. First off, I cannot even imagine how frustrating it must be for Plan Commission to sit here for hours, do your homework, read through all the stuff you have to go through, and just to have Common Council overturn what the time you spent on it. And I've had experience with this and have been really thinking through some of my votes on. And I've realized that while I might spend a few hours rewatching Plan Commission meetings, etc., that is nothing compared to the work that you do. And that is the importance of our committees, to delegate our committees to give us a recommendation of what to do. And so when thinking through this 2/3 or simple majority, I offer two questions. What do you think the purpose of Plan Commission is? And two, what do you think the impact will be in the future of allowing 2/3 majority vote in reference to the history of land use approvals and protest petitions in the first place? Protest petitions began around 1916 in the US when we first started using zoning in the first place. And it was a means for property owners to be able to digress from what commissioners said or what zoning said about who their neighbors could be, like Will Auschwitz said earlier. And that is, in my experience, from what I've seen with protest petitions, how it's still used. Protest petitions are still used as a means for those that have access to our city government process to digress from what they want. And to what you were saying earlier, I ask you, who do you think are going to still have access to our city government if we do a 2/3 majority vote? Because I can tell you that those that are underserved, underprivileged, do not have the same access to our local government. And if we maintain that 2/3 majority, their voices aren't going to be recognized in that 2/3 majority vote. So I can say that when I approached my fellow colleagues about supporting removing protest petitions, we were all on the same page that the process sucks. We need to get rid of it. But the logic of removing protest petitions, but then basically giving the entire city the power of a protest petition does not make sense to me. Like you're we want to remove protest petitions for the fact that we recognize the work that Plan Commission does, that we want to create more housing. So why would we want to make it a 2/3 majority vote for the entire city? Basically, you don't have to file a protest petition in the first place. The entire, and now the entire city has that power of a protest petition automatically. And furthermore, 2/3 majority vote is antithetical to what we're trying to do in creating more housing, because it makes it more difficult to pass zoning changes to create new housing. So the logic there doesn't add up to me. And that's why I introduced the alternate. And that's why I highly encourage you to support the alternate, because you as plan commissioners have a job, and that is to tell us what you recommend. And by the time it comes to us at council, we don't need to have additional scrutiny because the work has already been done. So I encourage you to support the alternate, and thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, I just want to support Commissioner Cantrell's motion and not a technical argument really, but a much more political one. I'm not originally from Madison, but one of the things that I find about Madison that's really unique and nice is the multiple aldermanic districts that we have. There were discussions previously about reducing the size of the Common Council and having larger districts. And that was, once again, sort of moved away from, because it seems that Madison and its history and how things are done here, that it really cherishes once again, the smaller districts where people can engage one another, engage elected officials and that sort. And it seems that the alternate that's put forward, it really fits. It's much more consistent with that approach, while having a supermajority vote would be much more efficient in terms of getting things done. Having, once again, the majority vote for just a simple majority vote for the rezonings seems much more consistent with the politics, the culture, and what is really, I think, sort of what makes Madison Madison. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments before we come to a vote? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thanks for indulging that. Yeah, I just want to be kind of clear about my thinking here, because maybe this is quite legitimately being presented as it's likely to be an exclusionary type of person who is opposing the zoning amendment, and we are really protecting the community of people whose voice is not heard. But I for myself, I don't understand why it couldn't just as well be working the other way, where a community that is not being listened to is being bowled over, perhaps, by a developer wanting a petition, a zoning change. And for the most part, from what I've been seeing, most of what's being built is not really being built for the elements of the community that are typically left out of power. But all that said, based on the voices that I'm hearing, if people feel that doing away with the 2/3 majority better serves the typically less powerful elements of the community, then I'm going to support that. I may not quite understand the mechanism, but I'm really interested in protecting, diversity and inclusion, and I somehow didn't see this issue as being negative for communities of color or low-income communities, but as protecting everyone from a zoning change that might have significant impact on the adjacent community. But that said, I just want to be clear that I will take into consideration what seems to be the prevailing understanding of what that 2/3 majority will actually do in effect. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I know we're past staff questions, but Commissioner Fernandez mentioned in his comments and earlier comments that, doing away with the 2/3 majority. I'd just like to clarify that currently rezonings require a simple majority and the amendment would maintain the simple majority, correct?
Correct.
There's nothing, but okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is agenda item 7. And 7, 8, and 9 are related, and we will be considering those together. Agenda item 7, 70593, located at 519 to 547 West Washington Avenue, 4th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow demolition of 9 multifamily residences. Agenda item 8, Legistar 70540. Same address, consideration of a conditional use in the downtown residential 2 district for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 8 units, and consideration of a conditional use to construct 2 additional stories in Area C of the additional heights area map to allow construction of a 6-story, 140-unit apartment building. Agenda item 9, Legistar 70560, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Virtue LLC and John and Christine Ofterhar, located at 519 to 547 West Washington Avenue, 4th Alder District. And I believe that Colin Punt will be giving us an overview. Colin.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. So as Chair Zellers noted, the applicant is seeking demolition permits to demolish 9 residential buildings and conditional use approval to construct the 6-story and approval of the related CSM. Regarding the demolition, while the Landmarks Commission recognized the loss of the existing vernacular housing, specifically pointing out one of the buildings, the Planning Division does believe that on balance, the standards for demolition permits can be found met. The redevelopment of the block is generally anticipated by the Mifflandia plan. And that plan does not identify any of the proposed structure or any of the structures proposed for demolition as potential historic resources. Regarding the conditional use requests, I want to bring up standards of approval 9 and 14. Standard 9 states that the project creates an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area. The UDC did review this at the request of Alder Verveer and made some specific recommendations regarding the design. The applicant has made several of the recommended changes to the design, though not all of those requested by the UDC. Staff has recommended a condition of approval that the proposal does make those changes. Staff also notes that approval standard 14, that when height in excess of that allowed in the downtown height map, which is 4 stories in this location, is requested in the additional height areas, the Plan Commission has to make certain findings The UDC did make specific findings in their review that the proposed building's height and massing are appropriate and acceptable, and that a building of lesser height would lessen the design of the building, and that the project benefits from having the two requested quote unquote bonus stories. As such, staff believes that standard 14 can be met regarding the two additional stories. As always, I will be available to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Colin. We do have registrants for this item, so I will open the public hearing. The first person we will hear from is Jim Stoppel, Regent Street, in support and wishing to speak. I believe he's representing or is the developer. If you could clarify, please, Jim.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Yes, I am. My family and I are the developers. I would really rather come in last versus first and pass this off to the architect, Kevin, first, because he can give you a full description of the facility, and then I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move then to Kevin Burrow, University Avenue. In support, wishing to speak, Kanofi Bruce Architects. Kevin, you've got 3 minutes.
Yep. All right, good evening. Thank you very much for your time this evening. My name is Kevin Burrow. I'm with Kanofi Bruce Architects, and we are presenting the potential redevelopment of 519 to 547 West Washington Avenue, which is shown on the screen in front of you. So this does involve the removal of 9 rental properties and the construction of a new 4 to 6 story apartment building. If we go to the next slide, please. The overall site layout is shown here, where we are following the overall massing and scale that was called for in the new updated Mifflindia plan with regards to 4-story structure directly along West Washington Avenue, stepping up to a 6-story structure if recessed back 30 feet from the front facade. And that is exactly what we have done. And we've also designed this building to have 3 separate massings along the street to further break down the overall massing and creating these recessed courtyard spaces in between each of the 3 wings. If you go to the next slide, please. We have updated the landscaping plan based on comments and feedback from UDC, as Colin Punt just recently mentioned. So we have additional plantings and foundation beds shown along the perimeter of the building. If you go to the next slide, the overall layouts of the building are shown here. So we've got 2 levels of underground parking and accessed off of 1 access point off of West Washington Avenue. We are able to achieve 158 stalls for residents, plus 10 additional stalls for visitors. So these 2 levels represent the resident parking and the visitor parking. We go to the next slide, please. At the first floor here at the lower level, you can see those 10 visitor stalls. And then we have the main entry to the building shown in the center wing, highlighted in red and yellow, where we have the lobby space. And then we also have our common area amenities at the first floor level. Second, third, and fourth floors are identical with a mixture of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3-bedroom apartments. If you go to the next slide, please. At the 5th floor level, then we do step the building back as required by the Mifflindia plan. And then also on the 6th floor, we've elected to step the building back and create a large community room with viewing towards the Capitol and up West Washington Avenue. Next slide, please. And then the roof level is also occupiable by being able to walk up there and for residents, but there's no actual functional spaces up there. Next slide, please. So we produced numerous renderings where you can see the overall character of the project in massing in relation to the adjacent properties. Here you can see the 3 main facade elements along West Wash. You go to the next slide. And here's a close-up view of the main entry point for the parking access, and we have created a loading zone that has been created deeper per the neighborhood request, providing additional space for loading and unloading. Next slide, please. Here's another view looking at the front facade. You can just go through all the slides here quickly. Here's a view of the main entry point. You can see the building has stepped back. Here's an entire view of the entire massing. Here's a view looking back with the depot building directly in the foreground and Bedford Street, looking back at the building. And then here's a final view looking along the back facade. As you can see, we have maintained the character of all the materials along all sides of the building.
Thank you, Kevin. That concludes your available time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next registrant is Bob Kleba, East Gorham Street, opposed and wishing to speak. Bob, you have 3 minutes.
Let's see. Here we are. Okay. Thank you, Chair Zellers, Commissioners, and City staff. I'm opposed to the demolition request for the 9 buildings. When I look at the facades of these buildings and the interiors of the buildings shown in the staff report, I see layers upon layers of the cultural and family history of Madison. Most appear to be in very good shape, with few modifications changing their architectural features. One of the standards when reviewing demolition requests is whether the building is landmarked or in an historic district. These buildings are not, but they are valuable contributors to the vernacular architectural history of our city. They show that families grew up within a stone's throw of the Capitol. Furthermore, without these buildings, our existing landmarks and historic districts lose their context. Removing these 9 buildings from the architectural fabric of the city has a huge impact on our few buildings that are protected. Nowhere does the staff report discuss the applicant's efforts at relocating these solid and beautiful 100-year-old buildings proposed for demolition. This is a standard for demolition that is not met and must be considered in your review. The staff report evaluates this demolition request with respect to the proposed use. Let us not forget that it is incumbent on the City Planning Division to promote development and thus increase the tax base. However, it is incumbent on the Plan Commission to evaluate whether it is appropriate to demolish 24 units of existing affordable housing stock that contributes significantly to what makes Madison an interesting city. Your evaluation of the demolition must be done without considering the proposed use. But please oblige me in a thought experiment. Let's say I own these 9 buildings and my proposal in front of you tonight was to demolish them and replace them with 9 3-unit buildings, each with 6 bedrooms. They'd fit perfectly in the DR2 zoning, would increase density, and would improve the energy efficiency of the dwellings. Would the Plan Commission be willing to demolish the existing irreplaceable architecture and its surviving fine woodwork for an increase of 3 units? Does the proposal's increase of 116 units make the demolition more just? This thought experiment is a gotcha because state law forbids your considering future use when reviewing a demolition. I ask the Commission to think carefully about how you proceed with this exceptionally large demolition request. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I don't see any other registrants wishing to speak. Were there any late registrants, Heather?
Chair Zellers, I believe Jim Stoppel still did want to speak.
Oh, okay. We'll go back. I thought he said he would be available to answer questions. Okay, Jim Stoppel, Regent Street, support, and then wishing to speak. Jim, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to be very, very brief. I guess I wanted to hear what other comments were, and I think one of them was relative to the quality of the buildings and the relocation. And based on their age, their maturity, they have been student housing. They haven't been necessarily affordable housing for many, many, many years. I think it would be very difficult to find someone that would be willing to pay for the cost of moving and then think they're going to put them someplace in the city of Madison that could recoup the cash that they would have to put in for relocation. Considering their maturity, they are certainly habitable, but they are not necessarily what most residents are looking for in today's market in the Madison community. The family is, we've managed these for many, many years and done our very best to keep them in the best condition we possibly can. But based on their maturity, their age, their condition, I think it is in the best interest of the city of Madison and future residents that they be redeveloped into a new product. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
And then Chair Zellers, there's one more speaker. I'm sorry. It is Peter Osland of West Main Street in support.
Okay, very good. Peter, you have 3 minutes.
Peter, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself. There you go.
There. Having not heard my name, I was scrambling to try to make it known. I'm representing the Neighborhood Steering Committee in the Basset District of Capital Neighborhoods, and I will focus on the recommended conditions of approval that the steering committee put together, that it was our understanding and conversations that the applicant is willing to accept. The first two go together. As Kevin Burrow noted, they expanded the loading area so it could accommodate 2 vehicles. What we've seen with numbers of these larger buildings, there's very limited space for a move in, move out, for service vehicles, for delivery vehicles, and there's all manner of illegal parking that starts to occur and crowd out into the streets in the more residential streets. And on West Washington in particular, there's very limited space for any of that to happen on this particular block with the bus lane there. So we added another provision that we think would be helpful, and that is to try to keep vehicles off the terrace in particular, which is often what we find when there's no other parking option, and to make that a condition of the lease and part of the approval. Our third one was to ask the development team to actively look to recycle or reuse or have people come and remove potential salvageable items from the buildings that the applicant does not intend to salvage for their own use. This particular application is unique in that the applicant has stated that there is no intention of starting the project prior to the expiration of the initial approval timeframe of 1 year for a conditional use, and that it is possible to get a 2-year extension. So these properties could be sitting for at least 3 years with a potential of a development, at the same time the owner having limited financial incentives to do maintenance on the building. And so we think a specific requirement regarding maintenance over this time period should be instituted. And then the last item we have there is being very clear and specific in submittals to the Plan Commission of which trees on a site or at the street terrace are going to be preserved and which are not. The most recent 3 development proposals that have gone to construction in the neighborhood have all ended up with problems, specifically with street trees, and in some cases after approval, looking to remove street trees, which then involves the elder and some of the neighborhood and forestry, and it would not have been part of your approval. I think that's an area where the Plan Commission should ask for additional or clarity to be provided on all the plans. On this particular one proposal, the initial information was buried under a utility plan with multiple colored lines. And
Thank you, Peter. That concludes your available time. Okay, any further registrants, Heather? No? Okay. A couple of registrants not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. O'Day, Savannah Trail, Partyville, Wisconsin support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Alder Heck.
Thank you. If I could, I'd like to ask Pete Osland a question. Okay, Peter Osland, I'm just interested in the ending of what you had to say about street trees and how we interpret the submitted drawings. Could you just clarify what you had to say there?
Sure. The basic premise is to improve the clarity on the submittal as to which trees are being removed or which are being preserved, both on the property and on the terrace. The proposal before you now has been amended some, the actual submittals, so that it's a little more visible. But this information tends to get buried in the civil plans. and often under multiple other layers of information on one particular sheet. So it's really difficult to kind of verify or ascertain, and clearly make it understandable both to the general public as well as to the commission what the impacts on street trees might be. And so that part is looking for just simple clarity and, perhaps putting tree removal on a general site plan as opposed to one that has all kinds of utility information and other layers that tend to bury the information. And I think we also asked to be more specific about street tree protection with that, because we continually find that the initial street tree protection that's put up tends to fail quickly, and the forestry doesn't have time to go around and check all of these, so the neighborhood has taken the initiative to make sure that that when there is a problem, forestry is alerted, and then they can go out there. But getting better information to the general contractors about that, and making it more clear for them as well as all the other participants in the process.
Thanks. That helps with my understanding. I'm sure you appreciate that oftentimes early in the process, a developer might not know where accessing utilities and things will occur, so they might not know everything. But you're asking for both in the right of way as well as on their on private property. You would like better depictions of what's expected, perhaps realizing it might change. But early in the process, that's essentially what you're hoping for. Is that right? Or throughout the process, I guess.
Not just early in the process, but it is in the actual approval documents, the documents that are before you, and the formal submittal that is provided, that should be clear, because that's the basis for your approval and, for any consideration later. We had one very specifically where after Plan Commission and perhaps council approval, I don't recall, the contractor came forward and came to forestry, I believe, and perhaps the elder, but said, absolutely, this street tree needs to be removed so that we have access and can build this building. But that particular tree was not noted for removal and had not been given an approval. And it may not have been clear to the contractor, or somebody didn't get involved, but making sure that the documents reflect what's going to be saved, because by the time they get to the approval process, they know where the utilities are, they know where their driveways are going to be, they have all that information. So really what I'm suggesting is that the documents presented for approval be very clear on this, so that we don't continually have these last minute sorts of events. I've been to at least 3 of these now in the Basset district, where there's right before Thanksgiving, an emergency gathering of people because somebody all of a sudden decides they have to take a tree down that they didn't get approval for.
And thanks for the clarification. I understand better now. That was my question.
Okay. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. This is a question for James Stoppel, I believe. And, we've heard that there's no intention to either remove these buildings or begin new construction for 2 to 3 years. Is that accurate? And if so, why bring this application at this point?
Jim?
I had started this process several months ago, and on December 2nd, 10-year treasuries were 1.32. This week, I think they're 2.8 something, and they approached over 3%. construction costs since December have skyrocketed. They probably gone up 15 to 20%. Cost of a 2x4 is just incredible. I guess I look at the economy and look at what's happening to the cost of everything. I do think we're going to see costs for construction, et cetera, drop significantly over the next 18 months or so. I think we'll see interest rates drop during that time frame. I could be all wrong, but we started this process long before the inflationary activities that have happened since roughly December 2nd. And so based on what's happened, I think it's my economic best interest for my family to put it on hold and start construction November of 2024, as much as I'd like to start it this November, but 2024, because I think we're going to be in a much different economic position. And I need to be able to say, yes, I have an approval when I go to the bank to get financing, when I go to the construction people to get bids. Otherwise, which came first, the chicken or the egg, having a financing commitment or the approvals for the project.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner?
The only other concern, would you have any difficulty with a condition that the properties be maintained in the meantime? There was a suggestion that this might be an incentive to not provide routine maintenance on the property. Do you have a response to that?
Jim Stoffel? Could you unmute Jim?
Sorry about that. Yep. Yes, I have no problem with that. We would continue to maintain these houses regardless. We have put a new roof on within the last 14 months on one of the projects. It was not inexpensive. Yes, we would have no problem with having that as a requirement, but the city building inspectors handle that very efficiently, even if it wasn't a part of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Commissioner Fernandez. Thank you, Jim Stoffel. Commissioner Cantrell.
Hey, this is a follow-up question for Jim Stoffel. I'm assuming you're going to continue leasing some of these units, even though you may have approval on this, if you're not going to start construction for some time.
We put all of the units back on the for-lease market roughly 3 weeks ago. And okay. As of today, we're probably a little over 50% rented. So I do not anticipate any problems having them fully occupied by August 16th, 2022.
Okay. One other question. The Neighborhood Association also asked about when you start demolishing or before you start demolishing the buildings, that you potentially allow nonprofits or individuals to salvage materials that you may not want to salvage. Obviously, in looking at some of the interiors of those buildings, there appears to be some, nice materials. Also, walking by, there's windows and some details that individuals may be interested in salvaging. Is that something that you would be interested in allowing?
This would be our third development. This would be our third development, and yes, we have done that with each of the previous two, and we certainly will with this one, whether it's Habitat for Humanity or anybody else that a nonprofit that is looking to pick up material.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, this is for your architect. Can you talk about the trees? In looking at your site plan, it did look like, in walking the area too, it looked like that you were protecting the large street trees in the area, and the driveway was kind of right between both large trees that at least I observed. Are there any other trees on the private property? I kind of walked in the back in the gravel parking lot. Probably not allowed, but I did. And it looked like there were a lot of box elder and some kind of large but weed trees in that area. But can you talk about the preservation of trees on your site plan? This would be for the architect, I think.
So Kevin Burrow?
Yes.
Could we get Kevin up, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. You are correct in that we will be preserving all of the street trees along the terrace, and our driveway has been carefully designed and located to land between the two largest mature trees. It has worked out very well for us with regards to access and to be able to save those trees. We will be doing full tree protection for all of those trees. With regards to the other trees on the property, there are some non-native trees, so to speak, in the backyard, which will unfortunately have to come down. There's a larger tree in the southwest corner that we do have noted on our landscaping plan to be preserved and protected if at all possible during construction. We're asking for protection fencing around that if possible. And there is one large mature tree along the northeastern property line, and it has been clarified that that one will unfortunately have to come down, as that is too close to the building. It's a larger canopy that will come into play. And then also there are utilities that need to run through there, specifically storm utilities for the entire neighborhood that will affect the root structure of that tree. But all the public trees will be preserved, and those private ones that I mentioned, we're going to try and save as well.
Are you planting additional trees in the rear area where you have the 20-foot setback?
That's where we're doing some stormwater management areas. We are not intending to do any large canopy trees per se, but we do have foundation plantings earmarked for that area. We do have some additional canopy trees going in the front yard, though.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Jim Stoppel. Jim, you mentioned that you were willing and had in the past let Habitat or other nonprofits take some salvageable materials from the property. And I just wanted to make sure you were also aware that there are for-profit entities that you might want to add to that loop, such as Deconstruction, that are interested in salvaging materials and selling them to those that may want them. I mostly wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that you've been maintaining these houses in fairly good condition for all these years, and so I'm interested in knowing, did you consider the possibility of moving any of them to other locations in order to save them, since they are, good examples of vernacular architecture in downtown Madison?
Could we unmute James Stoppel, please?
We did not pursue that. The windows in all of these buildings are single pane windows. The floors in some cases have been refinished to where they're almost down to 3/8 inch thick. Vinyl has been laid over the top of them in many cases. I just do not think they are of the condition and character. In my tenure of probably 25 to 30 years of managing of these houses, they're student housing, and that's what they've been used for during that entire period of time. And I do not think that they are something that's going to get moved, or somebody's going to want to move into a neighborhood on the east side, west side, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Structurally, though, they're sound. Isn't that true?
I guess I would say they're sound. Are they going to be good enough to be able to and make a way through the streets to get 5-10 blocks down the street? And where would they go because everything is filled? Yes, I would say they're structurally fairly sound, but the moving process may have some real negative impacts on plaster and whatever else you might have inside.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever moved a house like this?
I have not.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Mendez.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Zellers. This is probably for Kevin. I have two questions, really. One is in the staff report, Madison Fire Department had some concerns with access for the fire trucks for ladders and or hoses. Can you explain how you're addressing that concern?
Yes, thank you for that question. We will be coordinating with Bill Sullivan on that point and be working hand in hand with him as we have done on past projects to demonstrate what a ladder reach capability would be for fire protection and basically fire service for this building. If necessary, additional fire protection measures could be added to the structure per his recommendations if he is not comfortable with the final solution. And that's also a process we've gone through in the past with regards to other upgrades to help mitigate any fire danger within the property.
Just to clarify, Bill Sullivan is with Madison Fire Department, to clarify for our newest member of the Plan Commission.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. And my second question is regarding the parking and the loading. The Basset District had a couple of concerns with the loading capacity for the building, as well as vehicles parking along the terrace and up near the building during move in and move out, probably particularly.
We have revised the loading zone area per their request to create enough space for 2 vehicles to park and or a larger moving truck to be completely out of the flow of traffic for those accessing the enclosed parking areas. So we have increased that. And then they also are requesting that it be written into the leases that there shall be no parking on the terrace area at all. So we are receptive to that condition as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there further questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Cantrell.
Just one last question for Jim Stoffel. Because there's such a long lead time for potentially for this project, would you object to anyone that might foresee some of these houses for a potential relocation? Most of the time, the Plan Commission, although we'd like to see some houses relocated, it's a narrow time limit that people have to potentially find a site, find a contractor that actually can move it, look at it, the direction of moving it, and assessing it, even if the property can be moved. But would you be open to? I'm not requiring a condition of approval, but be open to any individual that may be of interest in relocating one of these properties that they would find a potential site within the nearby vicinity.
Jim Stoffel.
I would be happy if someone wanted to approach us. The leases for the new tenants that are moving in will mature in August 14th of 2024. Construction would anticipate happening starting in November of 24. So if anybody had any desire that they wanted to relocate and they could do it within the time frame between when tenants vacate and construction starts, we'd be happy to work with them.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Are there any further questions of any of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. So my only question to staff is, do you have any concerns about a conditional use being approved at this time? What is the time limit on a demolition approval? And is this just going to come back before us, a year and a half from now, or is this more or less routine business as far as you're concerned?
Heather.
Sure. I think the ordinance allows for an extension of up to an additional 24 months as a minor alteration. And so with support from the Alder and Planning Division Director, that extension can be granted without any further review by the Commission. I wouldn't say it's normal, but honestly, in today's in today's world economically, it's not surprising. I think that, developers often need steps of certainty as they move toward doing something. And I'm not surprised. And I'm wondering if we might start to see more of these. We did see a lot of projects put on pause during the pandemic. Well, I guess we're still in the pandemic a little bit, but it's not atypical to be approving minor alterations for 1 and 2 year extensions on a monthly basis. But I think the Plan Commission would only see this again if the Alder and the person in my position weren't willing to support that extension or it exceeded that 3 years.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
No, as long as I understand, if this is not going to create problems for Planning Division, I was just asking that, and I think I got my answer. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I suspect Colin might know the answer to this, but can you remind us what the requirements are for a demolition when Landmarks has weighed in as they have on this one, that these buildings are part of the vernacular and kind of the Landmarks Commission's middle ruling. What are the requirements with regards to exploring moving of assets such as this?
The requirements for actually moving the buildings to a different site?
Well, and the exploration of moving them, I think there's some language somewhere about folks should be required to explore that, or I'm not exactly sure.
Yes, when you're asking for exact language, I need to pull it up here really quickly.
My apologies, I should have warned you.
Nope, that's okay. The applicant, the applicant includes any information related to any efforts to relocate the building, including but not limited to assessing the costs of relocation, the impact of relocation on the city terrace trees, and the structural soundness of the buildings.
So that sounds like it's a requirement that they should submit that information?
So one of the standards of approval is that the applicant include information related to efforts.
Okay. Now I remember. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? Alder Verveer, did you wish to comment? Yes. Okay, let's hear from Alder Verveer.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Zellers, and good evening to you and the commissioners. I certainly want to state at the outset that I concur with your staff report that you have in front of you, and do believe that the various demolition, conditional use, and certified survey map standards are met here, and would encourage you to make such a motion subject to not only all the staff conditions of approval that are recommended in that staff report, but also the 5 distinct proposed conditions recommended on page 3 of the Basset Neighborhood Steering Committee paper that you have in your packets. Let me begin by thanking the applicant for, as is usually the case downtown, development teams are ready, willing, and able to engage early and often with not only myself, but with the neighborhood association. And that was certainly the case with this application by Jim Stockwell. In terms of what's to like about this proposal, I think it's critical that you all hear that from our very first conversations, although not happy about all aspects of the various adopted plans for this site, they were readily agreeing to not try to find any exceptions to both the DR2, the Downtown Residential 2 zoning district requirements, and then more importantly, the recommendations of the comp plan, downtown plan, and most importantly, the Mifflandia plan that was adopted by the Common Council back in November of 2019. As many of you probably recall, that Mifflandia plan was a subject of tremendous neighborhood stakeholder input over a several-year period, and much attention was given to setbacks and stepbacks of proposed new development on this most important approach to our state capital and Capitol Square. And so in all regards, one of the, I think most important features of this development proposal, quite frankly, is that all aspects of the letter and spirit of the adopted Mifflandia plan, I believe, are before you in this application this evening. That's not to say that everything in the application before you has been embraced by neighborhood stakeholders. As you heard, our fabulous volunteer neighborhood association steering committee chair Pete Oslin testify earlier, and in the written testimony as well, that there are differences of opinion regarding this proposal, and their voices should be called out this evening, even though you didn't hear that testimony directly except by Bob Kleba. Among the further aspects of what's to like here, before I get into some of the concerns that I do have, and just out of respect want to talk about those as well, is the fact that this substantially increases the density on these many parcels. As my fellow neighbor and friend, Chairperson Cantrell well knows, it seems like most every day, everybody wants to live in our neighborhood here, the Basset neighborhood. It is, like most downtown neighborhoods, seemingly more and more attractive every day, and we simply don't have the housing supply to support that demand. So I have always supported increased density as long as it's done right. And I think given that this proposal does adhere to the letter of the Mifflandia plan, that you should quantify this as being done right, done appropriately. So there clearly is a significant increase in density here with 214 beds proposed. I would say that the housing is needed. It's something that you all, mentioned in the earlier agenda item discussion as well. So that's an obvious. The two main concerns I have about this, frankly, and there's not a lot to be done in terms of conditions of approval, sadly, but is the lack of affordable housing. You have all heard me many times, or perhaps not our newly minted Commissioner Mendez, and congratulations and welcome to Commissioner Mendez. But you've heard me say in the past that it is unfortunate, to say the least, that we do not see more proposals for affordable housing of any sort in the core downtown area these days. I'm happy to report that that's slowly changing, as some of you have seen media accounts of, and hopefully this commission will see yet this year at least a couple of proposals for affordable housing in the 4th Aldermanic District. But that is not the case with this proposal. The removal of these 9 houses that's proposed here clearly will yield the removal of lower cost housing, just given the vintage age of this housing stock, the fact that, as you've heard the applicant testify, has long been used as student housing. The 24 units that will be removed here are absolutely lower cost housing than what will be proposed when if this is approved and built eventually. And that is unfortunate, despite the need for more housing and certainly the increased density. Getting back to the concern that Bob Kleba articulated in his testimony, let me say that I absolutely share the concern of the Landmarks Commission and of Bob and others lamenting the unfortunate loss of this vernacular neighborhood on this most prominent street of West Washington Avenue. I appreciate all of the conversations you commissioners have had in terms of the questions and answers regarding the potential preservation of perhaps some of these structures in their eventual move. And I would obviously welcome that wholeheartedly. And I know all in the neighborhood would as well. In particular, that Queen Anne house at 527, 529 is something that I think many of us will particularly see sad if it does end up in the landfill, and of course hope that most of it will be recycled if it cannot be preserved and moved to another site. I certainly appreciate Jim Stoppel confirming for all of you again tonight that he has very supportive of anyone working to remove any of these houses at the appropriate time when the leases conclude. It would also be wonderful if Jim would provide some financial support in that regard if there are interested parties, as has been done in the case downtown over the years. Sometimes when we do find the availability to move a house, the developer is willing to contribute the cost of what it would be to demolish that structure to a proposed new owner. So that would be terrific if we can see that occur. But the reality is, getting back to the adopted Mifflandia plan, which is still certainly fresh in my mind from our significant public participation we had with stakeholders only a few years ago as we developed that plan. Unfortunately, for those that are of the preservation mind, there was just not significant overwhelming support to preserve any of the existing original houses to this neighborhood in the 400 and 500 blocks of West Washington Avenue. Rather, an acknowledgement that new housing is inevitable, that the housing stock has largely outlived its useful life in many respects, and that we need the increased density. So that plan really concentrates on doing the new construction correctly and appropriately to the neighborhood surroundings. Many of you recall that you approved development pretty much across the street from this proposed site by the Keller family only a couple of years, in the last couple of years, that is nearing completion of its construction now at the intersection of North Basset and West Washington Avenue. So that really is the first example of the Mifflandia plan being implemented, and this will be likely the second case of that, although with the delay in construction proposed if approved, that might not end up exactly being the case. As it relates to the delay, let me mention that it would be my intention that if I am still in office at this time next year, and that might or might not be the case, I would certainly hope that the applicant, if they receive approval this evening, does return and appear at one of our monthly Basset neighborhood meetings to discuss the project again a year down the road when they might be seeking through the minor alteration process that extension that Director Stouter articulated of the additional 2 years. I think that obviously all of us are inclined to support that extension, of course, given today's economic realities. But I think it would be helpful, especially if there are any other proposed minor alteration modifications, that the development team re-engage with the neighborhood association at that time, a year or so from now. So I just wanted to articulate that would be my hope that occurs. But certainly I have not heard any concern amongst neighborhood stakeholders about the fact that this project would not move forward for a few years, given the economics. Lastly, let me speak as to a few more of those proposed conditions by the Basset Neighborhood Steering Committee, and absolutely want to take a moment again to thank Pete and the other volunteer members of the steering committee for their very valuable contributions to the process and the many meetings that they engaged in. We had a large publicly noticed meeting back in January, and then there were several meetings of the steering committee over the last few months. Again, appreciate that the applicant was ready, willing, and able to participate in any and all of those where they were invited to join us. But anyway, if any of you commissioners have any concerns about any of the 5 proposed conditions, again, that are detailed on page 3 of the neighborhood statement, please encourage you to ask myself or Pete, who I believe is still in the meeting tonight, if you have any questions about those or wish to massage any of the language as part of a motion here. I could speak to those. Many of them you have already heard testimony on, and some of you have asked questions about. In particular, I do want to mention that in closing here, lastly, the issue of tree protection is critical. And it's one of the things that I like about this proposal very much, is that from the very early stages, and I think it helps, frankly, too, that Kevin Burrow has designed many of the recent developments in our neighborhood, that Kevin has come to learn early and often that our neighborhood and most all the downtown neighborhoods treat public tree canopy as a critical asset to our neighborhood. We're losing far too many trees to development. Obviously, it's a trade-off that is necessary in most cases. But as it comes to our public trees, particularly on such a grand avenue as West Wash, it is critical. So we've asked developers to create meandering driveways around the mature tree canopies on West Washington Avenue. We've instilled from our first conversation the critical nature of the public trees needing to be preserved. And I do appreciate and want to thank the applicant for trying to make that work, again, from our very earliest conversations, and hope and trust that the concerns articulated in your staff report by our fire department will not in any way be in conflict with protecting this critical, valuable public asset of these public trees and that gorgeous, majestic canopy that we are all very fortunate to have on this grand boulevard. So with that, as always, happy to answer any questions if there are any, and thank you very much for considering my comments tonight and my recommendations regarding the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Verveer. Are there any questions by commissioners of Alder Verveer? Seeing no raised hands, we have concluded then the questions of staff. I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will recommend that the Plan Commission find that the standards are met and approve the demolition permits and conditional uses to demolish 9 residential buildings and construct a 6-story, 140-unit residential building at 519 to 547 West Washington Avenue. And also recommend that the Plan Commission forward the associated certified survey map to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval, including the in the staff's recommendation. I want to include the Basset Neighborhood Committee's conditions 1 through 5, and I have those. I can read those if the commission would like for me to do that.
Does the commission need those to be read? I think everybody has a copy of them. So, okay, so no need to read them.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Sure. As Alder Revere indicated, I live about a block through block from this site on West Main Street, the 500 block of West Main. And I believe that this is consistent with the Mifflindia plan. It creates density where we want it, and additional multiple family apartments that we greatly need in the city. It's unfortunate that we will removing 9 structures in this area that are vintage. And my hope is that since we have some time, that if individuals are interested in relocating any of these structures, that if they can identify a site and that can easily be moved there, that the owner would be willing to allow that to happen, and maybe even provide some incentives, the cost of demolition that other developers have done within this area, actually. But this is consistent, I think, with our plans, and I think is a good project for the area. So I'm supporting its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion, but I would like to maybe at some point in the future have a discussion about that first standard of approval for demolitions, and encourage staff to encourage applicants to include that information in their application or materials, so that we can, so they recognize that the options of moving a structure and also, as it says in the standard implication of relocation on city terrace trees, and about the structural soundness of the building, because I feel like we sort of had to tease that out, and I'm relatively comfortable with what we heard in this situation, but I think it would be good for us to focus on that a little bit more in future demolition applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Heck. I think you make a very good point. Any other comments? If not, then we will move to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Heather just pointed out to me something that I missed, and that is special items of business. Usually we don't have any special items of business, and I skipped right over it, but it is the election of Plan Commission Chair and Vice Chair, and Plan Commission appointments to the Transportation Policy Board and Joint Campus Area Committee. So, is there a motion in regard to chair of the Plan Commission, Commissioner Cantrell?
I will move to nominate and approve Liddell Zellers for chair.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. We will move to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. And Vice Chair, do I have a motion on Vice Chair? Commissioner Solheim.
I will move to nominate Commissioner Cantrell for Vice Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. And we will move to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. And then, thank you. Then we will move to appointments to let's do the Joint Campus Area Committee first. And our current representative to the Joint Campus Area Committee, remind me, Heather?
It was Jason Hagenow.
Oh, okay. So we do need a new representative to the Joint Campus Area Committee. And I have not discussed this with anyone, so I do not know whether there's someone who will accept a nomination to the Joint Campus Area Committee. Alder Heck.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but if nominated, I would accept a nomination.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
I nominate Alder Heck.
And do we have a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. We will move to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, congratulations, Alder Heck. And lastly, we have the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. And again, I am not aware of someone who is looking for being on the Transportation and Policy and Planning Board. It is a very important cross appointment. And I would encourage anyone who has the vaguest interest in doing that. And I do acknowledge it's another big committee, a very important committee, and having that crossover would be extremely valuable. Is there anyone who would accept the nomination if made? I would urge everyone to give it serious consideration because, again, it is and an interesting committee too. There's a lot going on and a lot of need there. And I think that Plan Commission members can bring that perspective to the TPPB. So please do give that some serious consideration. And I thank you in advance for doing that. Okay, back to our agenda. And we will move to agenda item 10, Legistar 70551, located at 1802 Pancrat Street, 12th Alder District, Urban Design District 4, consideration of a major alteration to an approved conditional use in the Suburban Employment District for a school, public or private, and consideration of conditional use pursuant to 28.141(6) of the zoning code to allow automobile parking exceeding the maximum allowed for the proposed use to allow construction of an addition to a charter school. Colin Punt, if you could give us a little overview. Thank you.
Yes, I'll just briefly go over this. The applicant representing Isthmus Montessori Academy is requesting a major alteration to an approved conditional use. This was approved in 2018 to convert an office building into a school. The major alteration is for an addition of approximately 44,000 square feet to the school and daycare building and expanding the parking lot. The expansion of the parking lot requires a conditional use for parking in excess of the maximum parking requirement. According to the parking standards section of the zoning code 28.141, the maximum permitted parking is calculated as one space per classroom, of which there are 29, and one space per 3 students of legal driving age based on the maximum number of students attending class at any one time. So that is another 11 parking stalls. This totals to a maximum requirement of 40, resulting in an excess of 36 parking stalls over the maximum with a request of 76. The school principal has noted to staff that the school employs 2 teachers per classroom. So by adjusting the formula that I just mentioned to allow 2 parking stalls per classroom, staff did include a recommendation in the staff report that the number of surface vehicle stalls be 69, reduced from 76 to 69. And then included in that condition that after construction and occupancy, if the applicant is able to demonstrate that there is additional demand, or if staffing or enrollment increases occur, that the staff recommended condition would permit the applicant to request a minor alteration to the conditional use. So again, just as a quick review, the maximum requirement is 40 stalls. The requested parking lot is 76 stalls. Staff's recommended condition of approval is a reduction to 69 stalls. I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I will open the public hearing. We do have one registrant, Alan Theobald, Deming Way, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing Isthmus Montessori Academy. Are there any questions for Alan Theobald? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I will ask for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will move that the Plan Commission find the approval standards for conditional use are met and approve the request for major alteration to a conditional use for a school in the suburban employment district, and an increase of more than 20 surface parking spaces that is also more than the 10% of the maximum parking required for 1802 Pancras Street.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any comments, discussion? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, just a clarification on the motion. Does this motion include the reduction to 69 stalls as recommended by planning staff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda, 12, 13, and 14, which will be considered together. Agenda item 12, Legistar 70922, located at 609 East Dayton Street and 616 East Mifflin Street, 6th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 commercial buildings. Agenda item 13, Legistar 70923, same location, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional employment district for a hotel, and consideration of a conditional use for a restaurant tavern to allow construction of a 3-story, 55-room hotel with a 1,450 square foot cafe. Agenda item 14, Legistar 70958, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Mifflin Dayton LLC, McGrath Property Group LLC, at the same location, 6th Alder District. We will first have a presentation by Colin Punt. Colin.
Yes, thank you again. So As Chair Zellers mentioned, the applicant is seeking demolition permits to demolish a warehouse building and conditional use approval to construct a 3-story 55-room hotel in the traditional employment district. I'm going to focus mostly on the demolition permit request here. Specifically, in its review, the Landmarks Commission found that the building at 609 617 East Dayton Street has historic value based on its architectural significance, its high degree of integrity, and its relation to the history of a local company that's still in operation. Based on this finding, staff believes that careful consideration should be given to standards of approval for demolition permits number 4 and number 7. Standard of approval number 4 states that the Plan Commission has received and considered the report of the city's historic preservation planner regarding the historic value of the property, as well as any report that may be submitted by the Landmarks Commission. Standard number 7 states in part that the Plan Commission shall find that the proposed demolition or removal is consistent with the statement of purpose of this section of the zoning code and with the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the city of Madison. So that statement of purpose in this case states in part that the purpose of this section is therefore to ensure the preservation of historic buildings, encourage applicants to strongly consider relocating rather than demolishing existing buildings, aid in the implementation of adopted city plans, maximize the reuse recycling of materials resulting from a demolition, protecting the public from potentially unsafe structures and public nuisances. If the Plan Commission can find the standards for demolitions met, including 4 and 7, as I noted above, the Planning Division recommends that the Plan Commission would approve the demolition permit, and then if the demolition permit is approved, then staff believes that the conditional use standards can be found to be met. If those two requests are approved, the CSM should also be forwarded to Common Council for approval. Should the Plan Commission find that the demolition standards are not met, then we recommend that the Commission place all requests on file without prejudice. Staff does note that in the case that the Plan Commission does place all files or place all items on file, that the Commission provide findings of fact listing which standards have not been met and the reasons why. And again, I will be around to answer questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Colin. I will open the public hearing. The first person we'll hear from, hold on just a second here. Is Tom Lee, North Lakeshore Drive, in support and wishing to speak, and I believe he is representing the applicant.
It looks like Tom Lee is not with us, but we have Eastman Lee Architects. Is that?
That sounds probably. So Tom Lee, let's give that a try. Eastman Lee Architects, is that Tom Lee, North Lakeshore Drive, Chicago?
It is, although I think Michael Metzger wanted to speak first.
He's not registered that I see. Yep. Oh, okay. He's not in my list of registrants. But
if Chair Zellers, Michael Metzger is registered for the conditional use item 13 and was a little bit late. So
oh yeah. Okay. He doesn't show up on my listing.
Okay.
Okay. Michael Metzger, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Zellers. My name is Michael Metzger. I'm the owner and developer of this hotel proposal. Almost 2 decades ago, I moved to Madison to attend UW-Madison and working in real estate here ever since. I live on the near west side with my family, and I'm passionate about seeing Madison thrive. I'm doing this development because I see an opportunity to create a unique small business and be part of Madison's vitality, diversity, and excitement. I'm an active community member and invested in the area. Within a couple blocks of this proposal, I own several properties and been involved in several mixed-use developments downtown and on the Near East Side. My office is on Williamson Street, and I'm a founding member and sit on the Capital East Business Association board. I'm proposing this hotel because of my experience of traveling in places like Austin and Asheville. Travel is changing, and many people are looking for more than just a traditional hotel. This hotel will allow guests to experience Madison like a local and see what makes Madison such a unique and special place. I think Madison needs a hotel like this. In addition to this hotel accommodating business and leisure travelers, I want the hotel to be an asset for the community, a place that people recommend to their family, friends, and loved ones to stay in Madison when visiting town, or a great place for neighbors to stay while renovating their homes with only one bathroom. This hotel will be locally owned, neighborhood-oriented, and asset to the city. It has many positive attributes for the commission to consider. First, hotel guests will strengthen the economic vitality of the Johnson Street commercial core and encourage future economic development in the area. We are committed to helping improve pedestrian and bicycle mobility in the area through a partnership with B-Cycle, and the location offers exceptional connectivity to public transportation and gives guests the freedom to explore the city without the need for a personal vehicle. Additionally, the scale, massing, and design of the building fit the fabric and character of the surrounding buildings and neighborhood. The proposal also preserves the Reynolds homestead, which will be fully upgraded to meet current building codes, and will extend the life of the building for another 100 years. In early February, I shared my initial schematic designs with the community stakeholders and worked to refine the project to meet their expectations. I feel that I've worked with them to the best of my ability to address their concerns and answer difficult questions. One area of concern will be discussed during this meeting is the loss of the Dayton Street warehouse and facade. We evaluated several different design options for preserving the facade in place and relocating it on site. Keeping the facade in place created several programming issues, eliminated the public cafe, and created a flood risk condition for the hotel's main entrance. Given the flood concerns in the area, I don't think any small business owner should be required to take on that risk. Relocating the facade was not found to be feasible. There's more details about this analysis can be found in historical resources information provided to the commission. Considering this, we delayed the submittal and redesigned the Dayton Street facade to honor the warehouse and the area's industrial history. We are proposing to incorporate salvage masonry pieces within the hotel's common areas. I appreciate your consideration of this proposal and am available to answer any questions you may have. I'll turn it over to Tom Lee from Eastland Architects to give a brief overview of the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Our next registrant to speak is Tom Lee. He North Lake Shore Drive, Chicago, and I believe he's the architect, although it doesn't show as a representing organization. Tom, could you clarify?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We are serving as the design architect, working with the local architect GLA, and representing Mike Metzger and the McGrath Property Group. Okay. I apologize for any confusion.
Thank you.
So we get started. I'll jump right in. So if you jump to the next slide, this is a design progression of some previous iterations that we were looking to when we were looking at the neighborhood through a different lens. If you go to the next slide, please. And what we heard from the community was that they were more interested in looking to preserve the industrial history seen in the Tenny Lapham neighborhood. And so that was about the same time that Mike informed us that saving the warehouse and its facade would be not possible. So we looked at ways to honor the warehouse, as Mike mentioned, trying carefully not to recreate history and being honest with the idea that we were creating a new building. So go to the next slide. So we were most interested in trying to retain aspects like the symmetry of the existing warehouse, the proportions, and of course the materiality of the brick. Again, being mindful that we were creating a new building. You go to the next slide. This is a rendering of the Dayton Street elevation, and you can see how the proportion and the vertical expression of the existing warehouse informed the new brick facade that you see here. We did make the facade slightly taller to accommodate a second floor, so that would have frontage on Dayton Street. Based on community feedback, we also we had heard that the front entry in the other iterations wasn't announced well enough. And so we did that by placing the doors the center of the industrial portion of the facade, announcing it with a canopy and some discrete signage that we think is appropriate for a neighborhood hotel. The entry to the garage is to the left of the door, allowing guests to pull in and minimizes traffic. Other garage configurations would have required people to drive around the block, which was a concern to the residents as well. The third floor is clad in siding and is set back from the Dayton Street elevation. If you go to the next slide, that volume continues back to the Reynolds homestead, which is on Mifflin Street. And if you can see in the rendering in the lower right, it becomes a sort of a quiet backdrop to the existing Reynolds house. And together, the house and the hotel volume create a new garden space, a green space that includes a B-cycle station that replaces what is the existing asphalt paved area today. And with that, I can conclude my comments. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. The next registrant is Graham Lynn, East Dayton Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Graham, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, you can hear me, right? Great.
Yes, 3 minutes.
Yep, I live right next door to the proposed site, and I'm on the board of our condo association. Yeah, I definitely strongly oppose the warehouse building. It is not technically a landmark, of course, but I would say it's an icon. And it's over 100 years old. It has some really beautiful masonry decorations of wagon wheels, which call back the history of this site was the Reynolds Moving Company in 1880 something, before there were automobiles. So also has some really pretty column decorations, which would all be lost. I really personally am disgusted to lose a perfectly reasonable existing building. That's a lot of embodied carbon that's just going nowhere. Just to recreate something that looks almost the same, it seems really silly. Okay, next point. I do not support the addition of another high-end hotel to the neighborhood. I think the city staff report noted that this kind of use is not generally included within the low-medium residential area. And I also want to point out that we have quite a few high-end hotels in our area. Hotel Indigo, the Ace Hotel are already up on East Washington. They just did a groundbreaking for another new hotel that looks very high-end on East Wash. So it seems like our neighborhood is already well served. Finally, this hotel has 55 rooms in its plan. This could mean who knows how many cars just for the people that are trying to stay there. And you talk about Uber and Lyft traffic, food delivery traffic, commercial services for the hotel. And you talk about the coffee shop potentially bringing even more traffic to the area. And if you'll know, I think another person commented that the Mifflin side was recently sort of reduced to you can only enter one direction. Now people cheat and drive the wrong way all the time, but they're trying to reduce traffic on the Mifflin side. So this is sort of trading that to put it on the Dayton side. It doesn't feel nice. This block is wonderful. People come and roller skate on this block because it's sort of quiet and safe, and it's really entertaining and delightful. And I feel like that's going to get destroyed just for some wealthy tourists to come to town. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. The next registrant is David Waugh, East Gorham Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. David, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners, for your time. My name is David Waugh, and I am a homeowner and business owner near this proposed development. I'm very much opposed to the demolition of this historic warehouse structure. This historic building is an important contributor to the historic fabric of our neighborhood. There is a great opportunity here for a creative reuse, as the neighborhood plan suggests. Page 8 of the Tenny Lapham neighborhood plan calls for the reuse of historic buildings. The plan lists similar structures nearby that have been repurposed, including the Das Cronenberg condominiums in the former Badger State Shoe Factory, the City Market apartments in a building that once served as a city market, the Livery, which was a former city horse barn converted to an office community room for the Reservoir Apartments, and the Lincoln School Apartments, formerly the Second Ward School. In regards to the conditional use approval, it is my view that a 55-room hotel is with the medium density residential that exists on this block. I myself own and operate the 5-room Mendota Lake House Bed and Breakfast on the 700 block of East Gorham. My business is limited by city code and state law to 8 rooms for compatibility with residential zoning. This property is zoned commercial only because of the historic use. It really is an anomaly since it is completely surrounded by medium density residential. Both the comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan call for medium density residential for this lot. The transient nature of hotel activity is not compatible with the medium density residential. In addition, this project is also short on parking. At my B&B, a good 90% of guests arrive by car. This project is only providing 25 parking spots, or less than 50% of their occupancy potential. Thank you very much for your time. Oh, actually, I have one last thing. In conclusion, I could support this project if there was a creative reuse of the warehouse and they cut their number of proposed units by more than 50% to lessen the impact the hotel will have on the residential properties that surround it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The next registrant is Bob Kleba, East Gorham Street, Madison, neither support nor oppose and wishing to speak, representing the Tenny Lapham Neighborhood Association. Bob, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Zellers, Commissioners, and City staff. Yes, it's me again. This time in front of you, I'm representing the Neighborhood Steering Committee for the Tenny Lapham Neighborhood Association. After 3 meetings with the developer, we met to draft the letter that was presented and approved at the Tenny Lapham Neighborhood Association Council meeting in April. Our steering committee attendance varied at the different meetings, but included overall 35 to 40 people. Most members were chagrined that the demolition of the Reynolds warehouse facade is requested. A few felt that the empty warehouse did not contribute to the neighborhood, but most felt that the look and feel of the facade adds character and contributes to the cultural and historic resources of the neighborhood. There's a very rich history that goes with the existing building, which I would be happy to elaborate on. The steering committee requests that the commissioners carefully evaluate the information provided in the staff report and by the Landmarks Commission when reviewing the request to demolish this building. When reviewing the standards of approval for the conditional use, we looked at different standards from those in the staff report. Standard 6 concerns traffic demand management. We are concerned about the 2-to-1 room to parking ratio and its impact on street parking in the neighborhood. Most committee members were concerned about the traffic impact of a hotel on the 600 block of East Dayton Street, which is residential and very quiet. Nevertheless, the developer is proposing ways to mitigate the traffic, and the proposal should have very minimal impact on the East Mifflin Bike Boulevard. Interestingly, the staff report does document the zoning requires 45 parking spaces for this proposal. However, the proposal has only 25. This raises standard of approval 10, which I believe should require further clarification from staff. Overall, excuse me, there were many neighbors, some adjacent to the site, who welcomed a hotel going in across the street or next door. However, others saw the proposed use as incongruous to the existing residential neighborhood. The site is very unique and comes with historic zoning that does not match that of the existing area. If you approve the demolition, please pay close attention to staff recommendations concerning standard of approval 4. The application was not reviewed by UDC. The steering committee felt that the current design is better than the initial one. I would be happy to go into greater detail about other development and preservation issues documented in our report if the commission desires. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, that's the last registrant wishing to speak. Also registered is Carter Lanzer. Furrier Drive in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Nitish Gandhi, Stone Lake Boulevard, Austin, Texas, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Heather, are there any registrants that I missed? Okay, thank you. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. This would be for the developer and perhaps architect. I did go through the materials that you provided regarding kind of the condition of the warehouse building and the different options that you looked at for incorporating that and redesigning the building. I was just kind of wondering if you could walk through that in a little bit more detail since we had limited time during your presentation.
So I don't know whether that would be Michael Metzger or Tom Lee.
That would be me.
Okay, go for it.
Colin, are you able to pull up the documents that were submitted relating the historical resources section? I think that would help a lot to describe the analysis we did.
Yep. Just give me one moment.
Is that what you're looking for, Michael?
Yeah, we could probably go to the next. Yeah, so there are a couple of steps in this process of evaluating this structure. We met with the neighborhood several times and kind of got the understanding that this building was really of significance related to the neighborhood. So we looked at what we could do, whether salvaging it or honoring it or how to approach that. So the first two things we looked at were relocating existing warehouse, which is on this page. So we realized pretty quickly, we met with some masons on site and just talked through the logistics of actually taking the facade apart and relocating it somewhere on the site that would make the hotel function as we like. And turned out pretty quickly that was not really feasible. The wall is constructed, it's called a Flemish bond. So basically, header courses are turned back into the wall, and it makes it a pretty difficult wall to take apart, if not nearly impossible. So realized that would be a difficult undertaking, and there'd be a lot of loss due to bricks breaking. So putting it back together was pretty much impossible. So with that, we moved on to looking to incorporate the existing warehouse facade into the design of the hotel. If you could slide to the next page. So we looked at a couple different options. So this is the proposed design. So this works out really well for us in terms of a natural flow of the building entry and access to the parking. It allows us to have space on the Mifflin Street side for a green space and the B-cycle station. It allows adequate space for the lobby and cafe on East Dayton. And then also one issue with the height of the current facade is that it really compromised the second floor rooms that would be facing out onto Dayton Street. It basically totally took away any possibility of windows on that side of the building. And then with this design, we're able to have a nice outdoor space for the cafe kind of behind in that kind of nook at the bottom of the site. And then it also, we retain the Reynolds house. So that was a nice addition to this project, is kind of restoring and keeping that structure as part of the development. This one reduced traffic on East Mifflin, and then it raises the entry door and mitigates flood risk to the property. So that comment, basically any new structure in Madison has a minimum elevation for the front entry of 852. The current entry into the warehouse sits around 851.3, somewhere in there. So a little bit below the city's minimum for new construction. And then the new design would move that elevation up to like 853.5. So obviously this is probably one of the lower sites in Madison. So that's a big concern for us to have our lobby potentially flooding. And then obviously the negative for this proposal is the loss of that Dayton facade. So if you go to the next page. So this was a look at potentially keeping the facade in place. It obviously it would be able to maintain the green space and the B-cycle station, and it reduces the traffic on Mifflin Street and still keeps the house. One issue we ran into, this was kind of a reverse flow for entering the parking garage. We like where you come up, you can get dropped off, or you can drive right into the parking structure without passing the building. We saw the potential for this requiring people to drive up and then make a U-turn of sorts, potentially on Dayton Street, and then doubling back into the parking garage and tucked behind the building. It reduced the depth of the lobbies quite significantly. So as you can see, the parking garage comes in and tucks kind of underneath the building, but it really shortened the space that we had before the parking structure started down to about 18 feet. So it reduced the lobby area down to like 1,100 square feet. So really no space for that kind of public component for the cafe, which I think is a really nice amenity for the hotel and the area. We lost the outdoor space behind the cafe. And then there is a significant cost for stabilizing and underpinning the wall during construction and attaching it to a new structure. It reduced the size of the building overall by about 15%. So that basically is right off the top line in terms of financial feasibility. Obviously, as you've heard in the previous presentations, construction costs and interest rates are kind of moving in both opposite directions right now. So financial feasibility is definitely a concern. And then this blocked the second floor windows on the facade. And then we also still have the low elevation issue. So the next page, we looked at one other design potential, and this one, it was more of an exercise. Just I didn't really think this was a very good solution for a number of reasons stated here, but this was just looking at bringing parking in from Mifflin Street would allow us to have some positives on other things. So obviously, it saves the existing facade. This would allow us to have a larger lobby cafe space that would work for those two components, and then it still retains the Reynolds house. Negatives, pretty glaring, is the Mifflin Street parking entrance. I think, our goal all along was to really minimize the impact on the Mifflin Street Bike Boulevard. And then obviously just the confusion with dropping off at the Dayton Street entrance and finding your way around the block for guests would be not ideal. The cost of underpinning it. This still reduced the square footage of the hotel, but not as significantly, about 9.5%. Then we still have the block facade on the second floor. And then this design also eliminated the green space and B-cycle station, which we think is a really important feature for this hotel. Just in given its proximity and the connection, we really want to promote, bicycle mobility and walkability in this area. So we thought that's a really important feature. And then we still have the flooding concerns with low entry elevation. So that's kind of a review of what we looked at with this. If you guys have any other questions, free to answer them.
Thank you, Michael. That was a very helpful overview. I appreciate that you had the floor elevation numbers on hand. Would you mind repeating that, just what the building currently is at?
Yeah, the current building is, I believe, at 851.36. The minimum elevation required for new construction in Madison, it's the first floor entry level, is 852. So we're pretty close, but still below the city's minimum current requirement. And we would be looking to move it up to 853.5. I'd really like to try to mitigate any flood concerns that we could. So I think, that's where we'd like to be, is the 853.5, at least for the first floor entry into the building.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
You're welcome.
Are there further questions of any of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
Could staff talk about the parking? They pointed out that the parking stalls that are required are 45, and the proposed project here is 25. Could you explain the justification for that reduction?
Colin?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. So in the parking reductions, as many of you know, are an easier option than, or I guess an easier request than parking over the maximum. And the code is specifically set up for that. And there are a number of options for reducing that. There are also opportunities for shared parking and for proximity to transit corridors, off-site parking ability, and substitution of other modal transportation modes. The B cycle edition, I think, is one of the things that was included in this. But there is a condition added to the recommended list by the zoning staff regarding that parking reduction, and so that the actual application for that reduction to the zoning administrator would be part of the final sign off. But if the Plan Commission did find that there were major concerns with the amount of parking that is shown, that I think they could include that in a condition if they do choose to approve this.
Did staff or did the developer provide any information for on-street parking? Is on-street parking an option in this neighborhood? And I'm sure the elders know, but I'm not familiar with this neighborhood.
Yeah, there is on-street parking in some areas of the neighborhood, but that's not something that we would anticipate that they should lean heavily upon. But it's taken into consideration along with all of the other things, like transit access and bike parking and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
I could just add, build on what Colin was saying. I want to clarify for the commission that this parking reduction is able to be administratively approved by the city's zoning administrator. So it's a reduction of 20, which is within a range of what can be administratively approved. So it's not in and of itself a conditional use request before the Plan Commission this evening. Just want to make sure that's clear. And then as context, while not pertinent to this particular review, since we've been talking about it a lot lately, I do want to share with the commission that the transit-oriented development, what we're considering for transit-oriented development would be completely eliminating minimum parking requirements. And this is, well within the area of what would be within the transit-oriented development. Again, it's not pertinent to this particular discussion, but I just want that to, I just want you to remember this case when we review TOD and more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Cantrell?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I had a question for Colin and Heather, more about sort of the general market for hotel rooms right now. I know back a few years ago in the before times, there was concern that, Madison needed more hotel rooms. There was a lack of hotel rooms, but now recently with, temporary changes in the market, are there concerns that, are we still concerned that we need more and more hotel rooms? And then just in the back of my mind, thinking about Hotel Red recently converting to housing, and, maybe housing is a better use, an acceptable and a better use for this lot. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
And Heather can jump in here if she has other things to add, but I do agree that kind of pre-COVID, in maybe 2018, 2019, we had a stretch where we approved several hundred hotel rooms, quite a few. Some of those ended up not materializing. The Drury Hotel is currently on hold at the MATC site downtown. There are situations like Hotel Red, but also more recently, I think we have seen a couple other projects decide to move forward. The Moxie Hotel on East Washington, the 800 block of East Washington, kind of got approved near the beginning of COVID, and they're proceeding forward. A hotel is going up as part of currently going up right now as part of the Judge Doyle project.
Yep.
There is a small boutique hotel that actually is a permitted use going in on West Wilson Street in the Rubens building. So that one has not come to Plan Commission, but has gone to UDC, and that's kind of a smaller hotel. So I think there was a softening of the market for a while, and the builders and operators seem to be going a little bit slower and more deliberately. But I don't think that the bottom has not fallen out of the hotel market in Madison, at least.
Okay.
So I think there is still space, and this is just from reviewing the projects that have come across our desks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Just one quick clarifying question on the parking. The 45 that's listed in the staff report, does that include the contemplated cafe use? I just wanted to clarify, since the 20 stall reduction is right on the limit.
Colin?
Nope, sorry. I'm looking at the table right now. I believe that I would have to confirm with the zoning, but I believe that they calculate that per all uses there, and so that would include everything in the building in that 45.
Heather, do you know anything further?
I don't know anything more detailed, but zoning does a good job of covering this in their condition number 6. At the end, it says that future parking reductions may be required prior to obtaining zoning approval for future tenant uses. And so if those proposed uses were to change into something that required more parking, there would need to be a re-examination of that by zoning staff. And it could result in exceeding the threshold for what could be approved administratively at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Heather, a question for you, since you mentioned TOD overlays, and I realize that's not particularly pertinent to this situation, but and maybe I should know the answer to this as a sponsor of that forthcoming consideration, but are commercial properties included in the removal of parking minimums?
As you know, that it's just it's a draft. There's not an ordinance formally written yet, but that's my understanding, that we had general support from the Plan Commission to remove parking minimums throughout the transit-oriented development overlay. But that's certainly something that there's plenty of time to revisit if the Commission would like to revisit that in our late June special work session.
Okay.
Certainly could.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question for probably Heather. But The use as a hotel is not, as you noted in your report, generally anticipated in low, medium residential. And, we've been asked to approve an awful lot of proposals because of the critical need for more residential development. And here's a place that is zoned for that, and we're going to get something different. So, but it feels to me that planning does not really have concerns with this proposal not being consistent with plans. But can you comment on that? Are we losing an opportunity to get a better proposal here that would include more residential development?
Sure, it's a great question, and Colin, feel free to jump in on this. Just a clarifying note first, the site is currently zoned traditional employment, TE, so it's not in a residential district today, although our adopted plans do show residential use as being something that is recommended at this site for the future. But when it's currently zoned in such a way that allows for hotels, I think that really weighs into our thinking. It's difficult to show a lot of concern when the existing zoning's in place to support the proposed use. And Colin, if you want to offer any nuances to that.
Yeah, just related to the zoning. Any multifamily building that would kind of fit into that medium residential would also require a conditional use in TE, because this is an employment district, and that if some residential were to be proposed consistent with the adopted plans, the actual form of the proposal would probably be very similar to this in scale and building form. So from an actual physical standpoint, this would be very consistent from what we would see from a residential use.
Okay, thank you. That was very clear. Thank you.
Are there further questions? Commissioner Cantrell.
I was, interested in any type of further discussion by staff on the elevations that were talked about, the 851.338, which is the first floor opening, and the opportunity that flooding occurs within this area. And we know that flooding is actually going to be probably increasing in the future, unless we do other things. But that appears to me to be at least one of the reasons why the applicant didn't move forward on preserving at least the facade. He talks about the impact on the hotel and the structure and that sort of thing. But it appears to me that the elevation, first floor elevation, would also not only impact a redevelopment for this hotel, but for any residential project that might come forward in the future. So could staff further talk about what is that a concern that I should have, or is that something that they can just redo this or address it some other way?
Colin?
Yeah, I think so this the flooding issue is a continuing issue, and this has come up in several situations before. There have been proposals that have required some alteration after Plan Commission approval, just to meet those flood elevation minimum entry openings. So it is something that is happening across the city. This is the isthmus does have additional issues with flooding. So I think as you see redevelopment occur, this will be an issue that we need to grapple with. That being said, I think I would have to check with our colleagues in engineering, but if there are renovations and alterations being done to existing buildings, that's probably handled differently than a redevelopment. But in the cases where there is a total redevelopment, that they do need to meet that, and that is a requirement for all redevelopments.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, just a quick question for staff. How usual is it that a building that has been identified as having historic value, as this one has by the Landmarks Commission report, that it's incorporated into a new development? Because we did receive the Landmarks Commission report. It came a little late, but it does identify this, once again, the building as having historic value. So how usual is it that what the developer is proposing actually occurs? Or is this something new? And is this maybe a trend that we may see in the future? That instead of that you may develop, someone may demolish a building, but then try to once again incorporate it into the new development.
Heather?
I can share some anecdotes. I think this is a tough issue, and it's a tough issue for our preservation planner as well. There's a negative side to, pretending to restore old facades. So taking down buildings and then putting up just a facade of a building as a portion of a new structure. But there have been some examples of that recently. Downtown on the State and Gorham project, that has happened where there's a facade that's being carefully deconstructed and will be reconstructed as the exterior of a new large building. There are some really good examples in this part of the city along East Washington where we have one approved project that's not yet under construction, Baker's Place, where a healthy portion of a building, I think it's the first, I can't remember if it's 10 or 20 feet of or more of the existing historic Gardner Bakery building will be incorporated into a new 10, 12-story mixed-use building. And so that's an opportunity where I think a developer saw a chance to incorporate a real healthy portion of a building into a redevelopment, not just kind of placing the facade of a building back onto something that was being constructed. It can be really difficult to accomplish that due to building codes that have evolved over the decades. But we do see some anecdotes and opportunities for that in this general area. And so that's not a very good answer, but I would say it's rare, but there are certainly instances where it's been successful.
Yeah, no, and actually that's a very good response because you make it clear that what's being considered here is not so unique that it's never been attempted before. Okay, thank you.
While we're on that topic and not seeing any raised hands right now, could you, Heather, describe, because we do have some new plan commission member, at least one, and I'm not sure how much this has come up, but could you describe the 3 layers that Landmarks uses and how often Landmarks has categorized buildings that are not current landmarks or in historic districts at this particular level?
Sure. Without having the exact numbers on hand, the Landmarks Commission sees each and every proposed demolition of a principal building throughout the city before it even is formally submitted often to the city. So as soon as someone notifies the demolition listserv of the intent to pursue a demolition of a building, they can go to the Landmarks Commission and have that building reviewed by them informally for a recommendation to the Plan Commission. And they have three general flavors of a recommendation. One is really no concern. That's sort of their green light. Two is similar to what you saw in most of the West Washington properties tonight. That's, well, they regret the loss of certain aspects of the buildings, but there isn't really any historic significance there. And then three is more their red light, stop, think about this. This building does have historic significance. While it may not be protected as a local landmark building, while it may not be protected in a local historic district, the building itself does have historic significance. And so they ask that the Plan Commission take a pause and consider carefully the demolition before moving forward with it. And so those are really the three basic recommendations that the Landmarks Commission could give. At your last meeting, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a strong sort of red light recommendation for the building downtown, and the Plan Commission in that case did not approve the demolition, placed that on file without prejudice. I can't remember another recent instance of a finding of historic significance from the Landmarks Commission. I'll look at Colin virtually to see if Colin, if you have anything to fill in the gaps.
One that I had thought of was, and this one's a little bit weird, but 619, 621 North Lake Street, a couple of fraternity buildings that were proposed for demolition.
Those were in a historic district.
They were contributing to a national district,
right.
But we're not a local historic district.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions of staff? Commissioner Fernandez.
I so hate to do this, but this feels like quite a burden on a group of not professional historians to take a recommendation and look carefully at it and really decide whether we have a major concern or a minor concern. And I've mentioned this before, but in 30 years of highway engineering, I wrote a lot of EISs and we dealt with a lot of historic properties. And there was always a third option, which was to preserve, to photo document the historic property, because most professional historians they're not too interested in the sentimental value. They might declare some building that is actually kind of ugly to have historic value. So the public understands historic value in one way, and professional historians tend to understand it in a different way. And preservation is the same thing. Most professional historians that I've dealt with would not consider restoring, maintaining a piece of the facade as any kind of actual historic preservation. They would say, no, that's faux preservation. I don't know if we have the ability to ask for some documentation, but if I understood better what the historic value of this is, I would think it could be of great value to photo document it, create something for future historians, and maybe even create something of value to the public that would be in the lobby of this hotel, showing photographs of the building. But I don't have enough professional knowledge of it to judge that, but I have to say that I'm pretty uncomfortable trying to make a decision on the importance of this when the guidance from the Landmarks Commission is, simply, yes, it has historical significance. Has there been any, so this is a question for staff, has there been any situations in the past where there have been recommendations of documentation of a structure that would be of value to historians and maybe even of value to the community that, of course, would allow the demolition of the building? Is there any middle ground for us?
Yes, there have been recommendations to photo document and, provide plaques, photos, et cetera, in a new building of what has been there before. I can't recall whether this was actually even a condition or just something the developer did, but a really great example of that is the Mott's building that's now part of the larger hotel, the Indigo. That warehouse building was largely salvaged, and the hotel is filled with photo documentation and memoirs of that company. I don't know if you've had a chance to maybe see that right across East Washington. It's a really neat example, a much larger scale certainly than this would be. But yeah, it is a tricky one. I think, the building that's there today is, again, it's not protected by landmark status or a local historic district. And I think this is indeed a tough issue for the Plan Commission to grapple with when these rare sort of red light recommendations do come from the Landmarks Commission. I think Colin was going to perhaps pull up the demolition standards just to review for the commission. And they are still vague, so there's definitely room for your judgment here. But Colin, do you want to highlight the relevant ones?
Yes. I think so. The ones that I had talked about in my intro were 4 and 7. So considering the report of the Landmarks Commission, and then as we consider 1 through 6, finding that the demolition is consistent with the statement of purpose of the section. And with the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare.
Do you want to put up the statement of purpose?
Could I also just ask about condition 2? Has the applicant received a certificate of appropriateness? Is that condition, as I'm reading it, that seems like they would have to have received that.
That would not apply since it's not a local historic district.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then here is the statement of purpose right here.
Thank you, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Fernandez, did you have any follow-up questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Zellers, I am noticing we may have another speaker who was unable to speak. I can't recall. Did Henry Doan speak on this item?
No, he did not. I did not see that he was registered.
Okay, so apologies. It's another later.
He's a late registration.
Yeah, so perhaps reopening the public
hearing. We would have to reopen the public hearing. Is there an objection? Any objections to reopening the public hearing to hear from Henry Doan? Commissioner Fernandez, you have your hand up. Did you have? No? Okay. Okay, then with the agreement of the Plan Commissioners, I will reopen the public hearing and hear from Henry Doan. Henry, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you let me speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd just like to start by saying that I do appreciate the developer coming back with a new plan. It's the first time I saw it. I think it's a better plan than the previous one, but I'm still against the demolition. I believe that the historic Reynolds warehouse would be a great candidate for an adaptive reuse. I think it would make a better hotel project. I think it's a missed opportunity to preserve some history and a sense of place in the historic marketplace neighborhood. The Reynolds warehouse contributes to an eclectic mix of early industrial buildings and residential houses. The loss of this building, as well as the recent loss of a number of other historic structures in recent weeks, makes one have to ask the question, what do we want our city to look like? How do we want it to feel? Do we want it to rapidly develop into Anywhere USA? We're losing history, authenticity, and an opportunity to do a better type of development, one that reuses and preserves. The city should promote the reuse of these increasingly rare and endangered buildings. Plan Commission is the last and best hope to save some of these historic places. The Landmarks Commission gave the Reynolds Warehouse high marks for historic significance, and that should be a major factor in your decision. One thought is that this the Reynolds company was, and I've heard this secondhand, so I'm not positively sure, but there's a lot of history there, and it may have been one of the first women-owned businesses in Madison. The facade is very unique, mildly Art Deco with a very nice brick and granite facade. Also steel windows, which enhance the look of the building. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry. Are there any questions for Henry before I close the public hearing again? Any questions? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing and go back to questions of staff. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Colin, could we go back to the discussion about flooding and base elevations from engineering? I've worked on projects in East Wash before where, as you mentioned, sometimes you have to do some redesign of the front to meet some of the elevation requirements from engineering. So do we have clarity, or do we need further clarity from engineering in terms of how they would look at this redevelopment? And whether that minimum applies, or would that need to come in a later date? Because I think that makes quite a bit of a difference, at least to me.
Yeah. So for this one specifically, engineering did provide a recommended condition of approval that, and I can just read it really quickly here. It's number 21. The area adjacent to this development is subject to backwater flooding from Lake Monona. Minimum entrance elevations for ramps to underground parking and entrances shall be set at elevation 852.00.
I see that. Thank you.
Structure exposed below this elevation shall be constructed of water-resistant materials such as concrete or brick.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was searching the wrong term in my PDF.
That's all right. And then while I'm talking, I do just want to note that the parking minimum is the hotel and the cafe. it just bothered me that I didn't have the answer, but I went back and looked, and I was correct in saying
Thank you,
that.
Colin.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Colin. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just a question for Colin, if he knows it. I'm interested in understanding the historic status of the other structure on the property, the Reynolds house. That's not proposed for demolition, so it's not been to Landmarks Commission. So there hasn't been any finding about that. It's just general knowledge that it was, part of the Reynolds family since whenever. And that's not proposed for demolition. All of that is true, what I've mumbled?
As far as I understand, all of that is true.
Okay. So there hasn't been any finding about that. I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yes,
okay.
the Landmarks Commission did review the removal of some sheds on that property, but those are not principal buildings, and so do not require demolition permits from the Plan Commission. So the Landmarks Commission did look at the property as a whole, but made no findings about the house.
And from what I saw, the house is not locally landmarked, and obviously not in a historic district. But
not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. It's a tough one. Looking for a motion. Commissioner,
this is a real tough one. But I think the Landmarks Commission has it right, and I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission find that demolition does not meet standard 4 and 7, and that the development be placed on file without prejudice, and specifically that the Landmarks Commission has found that this property does have historic value based on its architectural significance and a high degree of integrity and its relation to the history of a local company, which is of significant importance. And, and also standard number 7, which addresses the purposes of the ordinance and preservation of historic buildings. So if I get a second, I'll elaborate. But
seconded by Alder Lemmer. Commissioner Cantrell.
Again, this was a difficult one for me because on the one hand, the property is zoned for a hotel, but the surrounding area is principally residential. And I think the only reason why it was zoned for the employment use was because it was a warehouse building. But irrespective of that, I drove around this property several times, and it's a charming warehouse building built over almost 100 years ago. And I think it could easily be reused for something else. And, I understand that preserving the facade does not fit the plan for a hotel, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't fit the plan for something else. And based on that alone, I think that we should weigh heavily on landmarks here and say, hey, we agree with you. And it appears that their decision was unanimous. So it wasn't debatable in their opinion. So I guess that's why I'm weighing on that side versus the developing a new use, which I think they did a decent job on the elevation, but again, I have to fall down on the preservation of this building, which I think is important for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Are there, Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell, for making the motion. I will be supporting it. I just wanted to say this was a really tough one, but we see a lot of demolitions and a lot of times where we reluctantly support the demolition of what is historic character of a neighborhood because it is in line, the proposal is in line with our broader plan and increased density. And in this case, I think that the existing building really fits the plan, and it's not a huge stretch from what the developer has looked like to potentially incorporate it within the existing plan. I think the hotel is a neat idea. I do really appreciate the preservation of the Reynolds home and the thought that was put into that. But given the findings from the Landmarks Commission, and I think the potential to preserve it on site, I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'm racking my brain thinking of other situations where we have approved demolitions for redevelopments when they were in that red light category for landmarks. And I'm thinking about the cute little house on West Johnson and Mills, maybe, I can't remember, that is in the collection of parcels that's slated to become the new humanities building on campus. And there was a narrative about on that one also about women-owned business. I can't remember what the circumstance. I know it was a series of women business owners, I think, that had lived in that building. And we approved demolishing it. And I think I'm a little worried about consistency. I'm thinking about maybe a mid-century modern office building at Hilldale and, south of Hilldale Mall, that may have been in the same category. It wasn't by an important architect or anything, but it was part of, that was, I guess, in a national historic district, so maybe a little different consideration, but we still approved demolition. And so I'm worried about our consistency in these matters. So I'm still a little bit torn. I appreciate Commissioner Cantrell for stepping up and making a motion. I'll say that. And I appreciate the thoughts. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Anything else before we come to a vote? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. First, I want to just confirm that Commissioner Solheim's statement constituted a second.
We already had a second. Alder Lemmer seconded.
Oh, that happened faster than the blink of an eye. Thank you. The only thing I want to add is that, there, under further investigation, I could easily see that it might not be possible to reuse this building, and I'm particularly concerned with that flood elevation. So I'm not closed to the developer coming back with a proposal, but I would sure like to see it accompanied by some mitigation measures, such as a professional historian photo documenting it and installing some kind of interpretive materials, with the hotel, so that we've at least preserved for professional historians and even for the neighborhood. Something in detail of the structure. I agree with Commissioner Cantrell that I would defer to Landmarks Commission, but I don't really have enough information from them right now to know whether there might not be some appropriate mitigation that would allow redevelopment of this site and still preserve, in some sense, the value, the historic value that's there.
Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Control and everybody on here about the historical value. And I think a little bit more thought into different options of preservation or reuse, adaptive reuse of that, it should be considered a little bit more heavily.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else before we go to a vote? Commissioner Solheim.
Just one addition. Again, if we see this proposal again, which I hope we do, it would be helpful to have some additional information, or perhaps staff from engineering, and to help answer questions on the elevation. You know, if that facade or the part of the building is maintained, what that looks like for going into the building, and what the materials are and how they meet the requirements would be very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, could staff just outline quickly the now that the motion's been made to place this on file without prejudice, what's the timeline moving forward then if the applicant would like to continue with this?
There wouldn't be a time constraint for the applicant. They could conceivably come back at any time with a revised proposal to bring before the Plan Commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to business by members. I wanted to just remind people that this is Alder Lemmer's last Plan Commission with us. And I want to thank her very much for her service and her participation on the Plan Commission, and wish you well as you go on to your new adventures. So thank you.
Thank you. I will miss all of you. This is bittersweet.
You can tune in and watch us. Okay, thank you. Is there any other business by members? Okay, Secretary's report.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Some highlights for our upcoming meetings in June. On June 13th, one of the highlights is that I will not be with you. Kevin Perko will be staffing that meeting. And as it turns out, it's a pretty heavy one. So I don't know how that worked out for me, but the Plan Commission will be seeing again a revised version of street layouts and rezonings on the Ostermeyer site, particularly the old Hartmeyer property, and weighing and hopefully making a clear recommendation back to council on which one the Plan Commission recommends council moves forward with. The project at 222 to 232 East Olin Avenue will be back before the commission. This is now for a 12-story mixed-use building with 192 apartments, no longer relocating the Wonder Bar on that site today. And then another project that's returning to you is the 3900 block of Monona Drive. So right where Monona Drive meets Cottage Grove Road, rezoning of property to the traditional shopping street district, and a demolition and conditional use for a new mixed-use building with 69 apartments. A zoning text amendment to remove from the zoning code the neighborhood conservation overlay district. And that's something that the city has not created a neighborhood conservation overlay to date. those are the main items for the 13th. And then looking forward to the 23rd, I'll mention that the new sub-area planning framework is moving through boards, committees, and commissions now and should be before you on the 27th for a final recommendation to the council. And then a project on an 800 block of Regent Street for a 178 unit apartment building. And then finally, in the East Town Mall area on East Springs Drive, multi-family residential building complex with 463 apartments in a series of buildings. And then finally, worth mention is the demolition of 131 West Wilson Street. That's a 12-story commercial building, and many of you have probably seen it in the media recently. That will be coming to the Plan Commission on the 27th as well. And as Liddell mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we will have a special meeting work session on June 23rd. We're working through the agenda for that, but I think it will likely be heavy on transit-oriented development. We'll have some updates for you from the community meetings and more to share at that meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Any other word from any other commissioners? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell, seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.